Hey, sleepy friend. Welcome back. Go ahead, dim the lights, fluff the pillow, and let the day unclench from your shoulders. If you got a blanket, pull it up to your chin. If you got tea, let it warm your hands. This is your quiet corner now. No rush, no hurry. Just the two of us, and some gentle, familiar stories. Before we drift, I want to ask you something simple. What's your favorite cartoon? The one that still lives somewhere warm in your memory. Maybe you watched it on a tiny TV that hummed like a beehive, or on a big screen that filled the room with color. Maybe it was Saturday morning, cereal bowl in your lap. Maybe it was late at night, volume low so nobody would wake up. Whisper it to yourself. Say it out loud if you like. I'll wait. Hold that favorite in your hands for a moment like a nightlight. Picture its colors, its music, the way the characters moved. Maybe courage peeking from behind the couch and still finding a way to be brave. Maybe the Powerpuff Girls streaking across a sleepy Townsville sky. Maybe Dexter tinkering in a lab that buzzes softly after lights out. Ed, and Eddie plotting something silly under a street lamp. Or maybe it's Adventure Time's soft sunsets. Let those memories settle like dust motes in a projector beam. Tonight we're not chasing cliffhangers or jump scares. We're following the sleepy lore of classic cartoons, the little myths tucked between episodes, the comforting rhythms, the way certain melodies whispered, "You're safe," even when monsters growled or lasers flashed. We'll wander through Courage's nowhere, where courage means shaking and trying anyway. We'll stroll past Townsville's bedtime, where problems can wait until morning. We'll tiptoe into Dexter's lab and hear the tiny hum of ideas ready to bloom tomorrow. We'll wander the cul-de-sac, where the EDs always find one more plan, even if it only works in dreams. We will also go through Adventure Time. If your eyes get heavy, that's perfect. If you miss a piece, I'll still be here, turning pages at the same soft pace. There's nothing to catch up on. No tests later, just familiar footsteps on carpet, cozy echoes from the past, and stories that know how to tuck you in, breathe in and out. Let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the bed hold you up without asking for anything in return. So, have you chosen your favorite? Keep it close. You can share it with me in the comments when you're awake again, or just let it glow in your chest like a small lantern. And don't forget to subscribe to our little sleepy fam. Because we're about to begin. No alarms, no urgency, just a slow, cozy walk through the lore that made us feel safe enough to dream. Settle in. Breathe easy. And get ready to listen to the sleepy lore of classic cartoons, the kind that hold your hand, dim the world, and whisper, "You can rest now." Let's begin our first lore of the night and meet our beloved Courage. Night lays a quilt over the farmhouse and the fields fall quiet. The kind of quiet that remembers footsteps and keeps them safe. In the kitchen, a small lamp glows like a buttercup, and Courage sits on the rug, ears lifting at every kindly sound. The refrigerator hum is a friendly neighbor. The kettle gives a sleepy sigh. Muriel hums a tune that has no beginning and no end, only a soft circle that warms the room. Courage rests his paws near Muriel's slippers and lets the glow share its warmth. The lore of nowhere begins small, the way a story begins with a breath. People say the wind out here is a messenger. It wanders the plains all day, learning names and scents, and then it comes to the farmhouse porch to tell what it has learned. Courage knows this wind. It loves the taste of cinnamon from Muriel's baking. It nudges the wind chime so gently the notes sound like distant fireflies. When it reaches the kitchen door, the light makes the wind linger, as if it has something to remember. Courage has a favorite spot under the table, where crumbs gather like tiny constellations. He believes every crumb remembers the meal that made it. A crumb of toast keeps the sound of morning. A crumb of cookie keeps the sound of a laugh. If you look at them closely enough, you can see their little stories shining. He noses one crumb toward another, and the two become friends. He makes a small path of friends leading to his water bowl, a trail of cozy stars in a kitchen sky. Muriel sets a cup of tea down, and the steam rises in ribbons. Courage watches the steam draw pictures in the lamp glow, a farmhouse roof, the outline of the windmill, a heart shape that wobbles and becomes two hands holding each other. Courage blinks, and the pictures drift away. The lore says, steam is memory you can see. The house exhales its kindness, and the air grows soft around everyone who lives here. Eustace grumbles from the living room, but even his grumbles have turned round at the edges tonight. The old chair creaks in a friendly way, as if the wood itself remembers all the times it held a tired back. Courage peeks through the doorway. Eustace pretends not to notice, but his hat is tilted just enough to show he is listening for Muriel's humming. The lore says grumbles are only thunder that has forgotten the rain, and thunder that remembers where it came from softens into a purr. Courage accepts this and lets his heart unclench. The windmill outside turns one slow measure at a time. Courage knows its secret. Each vane keeps a simple alphabet of weather. When the wind turns at north, the vane says hush. When it turns at east, the vane says home. When it turns at west, the vane says here. When it turns at south, the vane says safe. He listens through the walls and hears hush, home here safe, a lullaby spelled in wood and air. The house hears it too, and the floorboards relax beneath his paws. Courage pads to the back door, rests his nose against the cool glass, and looks out at the yard. The sky is a deep blue bowl with sugar scattered across it. He thinks the stars chose to be sugar so the night would taste sweet. Out by the fence, tumbleweeds sleep like round cats. Near the porch, the mailbox dreams. The lore claims that mailbox once carried a letter from a place called Not Yet. The letter said everything is coming, but you can rest. Courage believed the letter without needing to read it. Tonight he believes it again. He returns to Muriel. She strokes the top of his head, and the stroke is slow enough to be a story all by itself. Once there was a little dog who lived in the almost middle of nowhere. He was afraid of many things and brave about one thing, which was love. He could feel his fear the way you feel a coat on a windy day, but underneath it his chest glowed warm like bread. The little dog learned that fear sits down when love takes its paw. Courage leans into the touch and lets the story finish inside him. The clock in the hall keeps time like a soft heartbeat. Courage thinks of the windmill words again and adds his own. Hush. Home. Here. Safe. Loved. He yawns, and the yawn is a doorway into a gentler room. The wind makes a small promise against the door, and the chimes answer. In the morning, the windmill will have written something new. For now, Courage lets the promise keep watch, and the house do the breathing. The lore of nowhere continues, one warm second at a time. Before sleep closes the kitchen, Courage notices a faint shimmer near the pantry. It is the quietest kind of light, like a memory deciding to be seen. He tilts his head, and the light tilts back. Tomorrow, he thinks, he will check the pantry shelves and see what the light wants to say. With that thought tucked under his collar, he curls into a small moon on the rug and lets the glow of the lamp become the glow in his chest. Morning does not hurry in nowhere. It arrives like cream poured into coffee, changing the color slightly and leaving swirls behind. Courage wakes to the sound of a spoon touching the side of a cup, and the word good floating through the air. The windmill says home. The kettle says ready. He stretches and pads to the pantry, where last night's shimmer waited like a shy guest. The pantry door opens with a soft gasp. On the second shelf sits a glass jar with a faded ribbon tied around its neck. Inside the jar, something like fog twirls slow as a dancer. The ribbon is the color of old sunlight, and it holds a small tag with a single word written in careful hand, solace. Courage noses the jar. The fog swirls and shows a picture of the farmhouse during a storm, but the roar is muffled, and the windows glow with comfort. The lore of the pantry says Muriel keeps jars for every kind of weather. Not the outside weather, but the inside kind. Next to solace is stillness, a jar that shows courage asleep by the fire, while snow mutters at the door and gives up. Next to stillness is bravery, a jar of warm orange that pulses like a hearthstone. Courage touches bravery, and the warmth answers with a soft hello. He looks up at Muriel, and she smiles as if she has been waiting for him to find these. The house is full of helpful secrets, and it trusts him with them one by one. He carries the jar of solace to the window. The light brushes it, and the fog clears just enough to reveal a tiny windmill inside, turning with no wind at all. Courage breathes out. The tiny windmill spells hush home here safe with every motion. He sets the jar beside the lamp, and the kitchen grows friendlier, which seemed impossible, and yet happens anyway. Eustace tramps through to fetch the morning paper, and even his boots sound like they are walking on blankets. The lore says that if you listen from the porch at midday, you can hear the grass telling its own story. Courage steps outside and gives the yard his attention. The grass hums a low, even note that vibrates under his paws. It is the sound of everything growing without making a fuss. He closes his eyes and lets the sound move through him, smoothing out the little worries he keeps behind his ribs. When he opens his eyes, he notices a thread caught on the porch rail. It is the same color as the pantry ribbon. He follows the thread across the yard past the clothesline where sheets sway like slow clouds and out toward the windmill. The thread leads to a notch in the base, a place where wood meets earth. Tucked there is a tiny folded square of paper, the kind you find in coat pockets when seasons change. Courage unfolds it. The handwriting matches the pantry tag. The note reads, "If you ever need it, the wind remembers your name." Courage feels taller without standing up. The wind answers by turning the mill toward here. He looks back at the house and sees Muriel waving through the window. Eustace pretends to check the hinges on the back gate and pretends not to smile. Courage tucks the paper under his collar. The collar collects his treasures, and tonight it will be warmer for it. He returns to the kitchen and places the pantry ribbon on the table next to the jar of solace, as if the ribbon might like a rest. Afternoon in nowhere has its own color. It is the color of dust motes swimming in sunbeams and of old photographs that learn to be gentle. Courage naps for a while, and in his nap he visits a field where tumbleweeds whisper jokes only dogs can hear. He wakes up smiling and discovers a new jar on the counter that he did not notice before. The tag says, "Wit." Inside is a small scene of Eustace scolding a chair and the chair winning the argument by staying perfectly still. Courage decides to keep this jar nearby for emergencies. Evening arrives the way a story arrives at its first favorite parts. From the pantry, Muriel selects a jar labeled Gratitude and opens it just enough to let a single breath of golden air drift into the room. The breath travels from the table to the stove to the sink to the doormat and then back to Courage, who sneezes once and feels wonderful. In Gratitude's glow, the house seems to settle even deeper onto its foundation. as if it has found the exact right shape of comfort for the night. Courage brings the ribbon back to the windmill at dusk and ties it loosely around one vane. He wants the wind to know it has a friend. The vane turns, and for a moment, the ribbon writes 3 words in the sky, not letters exactly, more like a feeling that understands language without needing it. Come by tomorrow. The wind flip-flops once like a happy pup and drifts toward the porch. Courage follows it home, ready to learn what the pantry will show him next, and ready to believe that his name is safe in the air. There is a time at night when the living room becomes a library. No one put up shelves and no one stamped checkout cards, yet the place fills with books you cannot see and stories you can. Courage steps onto the rug, and the rug remembers every foot that has crossed it. Each memory stacks itself without weight, and the room hushes with a pleasant hush, the kind that invites secrets to be kind. In the far corner stands the dust librarian. Dust is often misunderstood. In Nowhere, Dust is an archivist. It keeps the softest records of all the gentlest days. The dust librarian wears a coat made of sunbeams that have retired. When Courage blinks slowly, he can almost read the titles sewn into that coat. Rain that wasn't scary. The day the wind chose lavender. The evening Eustace laughed without knowing he did. Courage approaches, heart steady, tail moving like a metronome set to calm. The librarian nods, which looks like a small swirl of motes lifting in agreement. It gestures toward a low shelf that is not there and is absolutely there. On it lies a book that smells like warm toast. Courage opens it with his paw. Inside are scenes from the farmhouse told from the perspective of objects that never ask for attention. The kettle dreams of becoming a lullaby. The screen door practices patience. The mailbox makes lists of the sky. Every few pages, Courage finds a handwritten note tucked into the margin. The handwriting is familiar now. The notes say things like, "The quiet is trying to help, and you are allowed to be small here, and the wind hears everything you do not have words for." He reads them aloud in his head and feels them land in the middle of his chest, where they become new shelves. The librarian brings a small wooden stamp and taps it gently onto the inside of Courage's collar. Not ink, a memory. The stamp leaves the feeling of being welcomed home every time he steps over the threshold, even if he is only coming back from the porch. Courage touches the place with his paw and feels the doorway say hello. It will say it every time. Muriel knits in her chair and hums a melody that could teach the clock to breathe slower. The yarn unfurls like a path through a field. Courage follows the path with his eyes and sees that the blanket she is making carries the colors of the jars from the pantry. Solace as soft gold, stillness as winter blue, bravery as ember orange, gratitude as honeyed light, wit as a glimmer of silver at the edge. The blanket will live on the back of the couch and will know how to tuck itself around the shoulders without being asked. Eustace pretends to be asleep and is not. He watches from behind the newspaper and does not notice when one of his boots, tired of being stern, gives a gentle nod to Courage. The boot and the dog have an understanding. Both have carried more than anyone saw. Both know the relief of a floor that does not argue. The lore says kindness is sometimes just the floor agreeing to hold everyone up the same amount. Courage closes the toast-smelling book. The librarian produces another, thinner one. Its cover is the color of dusk in late summer. The title is written in a language that feels like wind on the cheek. Courage opens to the first page and finds a story about a night when the windmill stopped for a heartbeat, only to remember itself and go on. The world did not end. The world took that pause as a chance to hold its breath and cherish the inhale that followed. Courage smiles into the quiet. By the time the living room library returns to being a living room, Courage has received a card without numbers, stamped with the feeling of belonging. He tucks the card behind his name on his collar. The card makes the collar sit more comfortably. He curls at Muriel's feet while she finishes a row, and the clock decides to be kind about the late hour. Dreams approach the house as softly as socks. Courage slips into one of them and finds himself walking a path made entirely of whispers that mean everything is all right. Before sleep takes the last corners of the room, the dust librarian draws a fingertip across the coffee table and leaves a tiny heart. Courage sees it from the floor and knows it is not dust exactly. It is a punctuation mark that means the sentence of tonight is complete. In the morning, sunlight will write a new chapter on the walls. For now, the book closes itself with a hush. Dawn spreads a peach stripe on the horizon. Courage steps into the porch and the boards greet him by name. The porch is the meeting place for all polite mysteries. The mailbox nods. The rocking chair makes a sound like a long exhale. The wind sits on the top step and kicks its legs like a child who has been promised a story. Courage brings the pantry ribbon, which now carries the scent of tea and clean wood. He ties it around the arm of the rocking chair. The chair creaks with pleasure and begins a slow, regular motion that seems to rock the whole yard. The lore says a porch can hold tomorrow gently so that you never feel rushed. Courage believes this as he watches the fields take their time waking up. Across the yard, the windmill turns toward safe, then home, then here. Every turn feels like a page in a book you have read before and still love. Courage carries the tiny note beneath his collar and reads it again without taking it out. If you ever need it, the wind remembers your name. He wonders if the wind remembers Muriel's first recipe for comfort. He wonders if it remembers the day Eustace first set down a heavy thing. He wonders if it remembers the time Courage stood tall while his knees shook. The wondering makes him feel awake in a sweet way, like a lantern with extra oil. The porch steps lead to the yard, and the yard leads to the fence, and the fence leads to the road that hardly ever goes anywhere. Courage walks to the fence and looks down the road until it becomes a line that means the idea of traveling. He does not need to follow it. The porch has taught him that sometimes tomorrow will come to you if you make a kind place for it to rest. He returns to the steps and places a saucer of water at the top, a small, bright offering to passing birds and visiting hours. Muriel appears in the doorway with 2 biscuits wrapped in a napkin. She gives one to Courage and sets the other on the rail so the wind can try the crumbs. The wind obliges and makes a happy spiral. Eustace opens the screen door just enough to say, "You two will spoil that breeze," before taking it back inside. The porch accepts this as a compliment and adds it to its collection of harmless declarations. Courage notices a small scuff on the step, as if the porch had been signed by a gentle visitor. He presses his paw to the mark and feels the warmth of days gone well. The scuff becomes a smoothness beneath his touch. The world is full of little places that want to be cared for. The lore suggests that when you smooth a step, the step smooths something in you in return. Courage finds this true in the quiet center of his chest. Midday hums past. Afternoon drapes itself over the porch like a friendly cat. Courage dozes and wakes and dozes again, each waking a new room, each dozing away to walk between rooms without leaving. In one waking, he hears the windmill say, "Here." In another, he hears it say, "Hush." Each word fits, each word is enough. He tracks the sun across the railing and thinks of all the times he has watched light move and called it a day. As evening gathers, he looks through the pantry window and sees a new jar on the sill. The tag is a bright, simple word: return. Muriel brings it out and sets it beside Courage. Inside, the fog holds a scene of the front door opening and the exact sound the house makes when someone loved steps through. The sound is not a sound you can record. It is the feeling of air rolling back its shoulders. Courage's eyes soften. He knows this moment. It happens every time Muriel comes in with groceries, or Eustace steps in from the shed, or Courage himself wanders back from meeting the field. Muriel opens the jar and lets a breath of return seep into the porch. For a moment, the whole world seems to be arriving. The fence looks freshly hugged. The sky looks like it has just remembered where it left its favorite color. The windmill writes safe and means it. Night finds them there, a small family in a porch that knows how to hold them. Courage keeps watch with no strain at all. The wind keeps company with no chill at all. Tomorrow climbs the steps and sits beside them without needing to speak. They make room for it, and the porch hums with approval. When the stars begin their steady work, Courage feels a grin rise from his belly. It is the quiet kind that belongs to dogs and houses and wind that wants to be kind forever. In nowhere, even visitors learn to arrive quietly. Tonight, a presence comes down the road with the care of a moth. It is the sort of visitor that would have seemed frightening if it had come fast. It does not. It keeps a respectful distance from shadows and admires the way lamplight spills under the kitchen door. Courage senses it and does not bristle. His ears lift. His tail draws a slow ribbon in the air. He stands and sits, then stands again, testing the night like a bath. The visitor pauses at the edge of the yard. It is not a person. It is not a creature with claws. It is the echo of a question. The lore says nowhere collects the questions people whisper when they are almost asleep. Where is home? What if I am small forever? Who will teach the wind my name? The questions bundle themselves into a polite guest and come looking for a porch that will listen. Courage tiptoes to the grass, and the grass approves. He brings the visitor to the rocking chair and offers it the pantry ribbon to hold. The visitor takes it and becomes a little more visible. It looks like a gentle bend in the air. It looks like a memory halfway to becoming a lesson. Courage places the jar of bravery on the rail and opens it a finger's width. Warmth rises like a friendly bakery. The visitor relaxes. The windmill says hush. Muriel brings out 2 cups, one for herself and one for Courage, because this is the custom here. Courage sets his cup near the visitor so the steam can brush whatever face it might have. The steam draws 2 figures holding hands and then turns one of them into a dog with big eyes. Courage smiles. The visitor becomes a little more solid, a little more sure of itself. It seems to like being seen without being asked to perform. They sit together and listen to the night tell its story. The coyote far away says, "Everything is fine in my direction." The owl closer in says, "I have memorized every dark, and I am not afraid of them." The porch says, "Both of you are part of this room." The visitor finally speaks, not out loud, but in the way a person decides to share an old photograph. It shows Courage a picture of the farmhouse from years ago when the paint wore a younger color. In the doorway stands Love wearing an apron. On the steps sits Stubbornness with a soft underside. Between them, a little dog whose heart is larger than the sky. Courage understands. The visitor is not here to frighten. It is here to be comforted by the fact that courage is not the absence of worry. Courage is the lamp that makes worry visible without turning it into a monster. The visitor leans into the light of the kitchen window and softens into something like a blessing. Muriel hums. Eustace coughs once as if to say, "I am here too in my own way." The windmill says here safe, a repetition that makes the syllables into a rocking motion. Courage brings the jar labeled return and opens it fully for one long inhale. The fragrance of welcome slides around the porch, down the steps, across the yard, and out to the fence. It finds the road. It finds the places beyond the road. It finds every corner of the night that wondered if it belonged. The visitor sighs in a way that makes the stars blink kindly. Having been answered, the visitor stands, returns the ribbon to Courage, and drifts back the way it came, lighter than when it arrived. He watches until it becomes another kindness in the distance. He ties the ribbon around his collar and feels his name sit more comfortably in the air. The porch returns to its steady breathing. The night, satisfied, tucks its questions under its arm. Courage finishes his cup. Muriel squeezes his ear and tells him without words that he did a good job. The windmill turns once and spells loved without any letters at all. Courage climbs down to the yard and walks a slow circle of gratitude. He believes circles are how homes draw themselves. When he completes the loop, the house seems to nod. He curls on the mat by the door and lets sleep step into him like an old friend who knows the route without turning on the lights. The stars keep their watch. The wind keeps its promise. The house keeps its heart open. All of it is enough. The last part of night is the clearest. The sky holds its breath before pink arrives and everything important speaks in its indoor voice. Courage wakes to that voice and listens. The windmill whispers here. The floorboards whisper welcome. The kettle readies its small applause. The lore says dawn is when the world writes thank you notes to itself. Courage goes outside to read them. The yard wears dew like tiny bells that do not ring. Courage steps carefully so he does not disturb their quiet song. He visits the windmill and touches the ribbon that once tied the pantry jar and then tied the rocking chair and then tied the visitor to comfort. He unties it and ties it again in a simple bow. The bow is small and perfect. He believes small and perfect is how big and perfect begins. He takes the pantry note from beneath his collar and reads it in the new light. If you ever need it, the wind remembers your name. He looks into the fields and speaks his name softly once. The wind answers from a long way off and gets closer until there's a kindness standing right beside him. It repeats his name and adds Muriel's and adds Eustace's and adds the porch and the pantry and the windmill and the house itself. The names braid together and make a stronger word. Home. Courage stands very still and lets the braid settle around him. He thinks about all the jars and all the pages and all the gentle scuffs and the way every corner of this place keeps track of love. He thinks about how fear used to feel like a thundercloud and how now it feels like rain that knows how to water the garden. He thinks about the dust librarian stamping belonging in a collar and the porch holding tomorrow without urgency and a visitor that was only a question looking for a soft answer. Muriel opens the door and calls him for breakfast, not loudly, only as if she were tapping a bell made of warm bread. Courage trots in. Eustace is already at the table, pretending the chair is not his favorite. The jar of wit sparkles for a second, and the chair seems to win the morning once more. Everyone takes a seat, and the house makes that sound again, the one the jar of return held. Air rolling back its shoulders. A simple gathering. A small miracle that happens every day. After breakfast, Courage carries the ribbon back to the pantry. He ties it on the knob as a promise. The jars glow in agreement. Solace glows. Stillness glows. Bravery glows. Gratitude glows. Wit glows with a clever twinkle at the end. He closes the door gently as if the jars were resting. The kitchen settles into its best version of itself. The refrigerator hums as good work. The lamp gives the room the color of a hug. Outside, the wind learns the last part of the lesson. It takes courage's name and brings it carefully to the fence, to the road, to the far edge of the plains where late light collects in a bowl, and then carries it back, unchanged and unharmed. The windmill watches and approves. Courage sits on the step and watches too. He understands something he did not know he was learning. Being brave does not mean being loud. It means being held together by quiet, friendly things. It means having your name carried without being lost. It means a house that says hello every time you cross the line between outside and in. The day unfolds with kindness. The living room becomes a library and then a living room again. The porch collects harmless declarations and then releases them like soft balloons. The pantry keeps weather for the heart. The windmill writes lullabies without ink. The mailbox dreams gentle dreams. The fence holds the horizon just far enough away to keep it interesting and just close enough to keep it kind. Courage moves through each room like a word that has found the right sentence. As evening returns, he curls by Muriel's feet and the house prepares its nightlight glow. He thinks about the visitor and hopes it found a porch somewhere else. He thinks about his own questions and finds them quiet for now. He thinks about the ribbon and the note and the jars and the braid of names and feels full in the good way. The kind of full that makes sleep a natural next step. The windmill turns once, then once again, spelling hush home here safe as the stars blink their patient agreement. Courage lets his eyelids drift toward each other and imagines he can see the dust librarian closing up the day's shelves. He imagines the porch writing tomorrow in its careful handwriting. He imagines the pantry jars resting with their soft fogs and kind tags. He imagines Muriel's hand, Eustace's chair, the house like a heart that learned to be a house. When sleep finally touches him, it does so with a promise. Your name is remembered. Your fear may visit, but it will sit politely. Your courage lives here now, under the lamp, in the pantry, on the porch, in the wind, stamped in your collar, written in the mill. The promise hums with the refrigerator. It rocks with the chair. It shines with the lamp. It breathes with the house. The promise is the lore of courage in nowhere, and the lore is a lullaby that never ends, only softens, until the morning asks for it again. With this, the tale of courage for tonight ends, and our little cozy night moves to the next cartoon. Let's meet our little cuties. Yes, I am talking about the Powerpuff Girls. The city of Townsville learns its bedtime by the glow of kitchen windows and the hush of crosswalk lights, turning from command to comfort. Traffic thins into a ribbon of sleepy red pearls. Rooftops hold the last warmth of day like cupped hands. In the suburbs, the Utonium house rests with its porch light softened to a halo, and inside, 3 small capes are draped over the back of a couch, as if the night itself has decided to tuck them in. On the coffee table sits a glass of milk with 3 straws leaning together, as if they are sharing a secret. The carpet remembers the weight of tiny boots racing home, the flutter of capes, the bright skid of laughter that always stops just in time before bumping the lamp. Blossom straightens the books on the shelf so that every spine looks ready for a story. Bubbles lines up her stuffed octopus and the little animals she rescued from a yard sale so they won't feel left out. Buttercup flicks the light switch off and on once, not to test it, but to reassure herself that she can choose the dark, and the dark will behave. The red hotline on the end table has a soft way of not ringing when it isn't needed. Tonight its silent bulb glows like an ember in a quiet fireplace. In Townsville, the phone is more than a phone. It is a promise that if anything wakes rudely, someone will answer gently. The mayor sets his green phone in its cradle across town and drifts toward a dream that smells like pickles and paper clips, while Miss Bellum's last typed note of the day becomes a paper bird and flies into a neat folder labeled Tomorrow. Downstairs, the lab hums in a low, contented key. The chalkboard is a galaxy of tidy lines that know where they belong. A jar on the counter holds sugar, another spice, another everything nice. And then there is the jar that does not live on a shelf. It is an idea more than a container, the faint hush that gathers when you add just a little more of what matters most. The professor walks through the room in his socks, and the tiles warm beneath him, recognizing the steps of a man who turned a recipe into a family. He pauses by the nightlight that guards the stairs. He does not remember installing it, and yet it has always been there in the exact spot where a small shadow might need reassurance. The nightlight throws a petal of gold onto the banister. Blossom passes it like a captain passing a lighthouse. Bubbles kisses her palm and presses it to the glow as if to say thank you. Buttercup brushes it with the back of her hand and decides, grudgingly and forever, that this one little lamp is on her team. The city has its own small guardians you only notice after bedtime. The street sweepers move in their patient circles, like turtles in reflective vests. The pigeons arrange themselves on the power lines in a musical staff that plays a lullaby only antennae can hear. The park fountain lets its water drop more slowly, counting to 3 between each fall, as if it has learned the girl's rhythm and wants to fall asleep at the same pace. Even the skyline, all rectangles and bravado by day, lies back against the sky and sighs into softer edges. People think the girls are made of speed and spark, and they are. But here is the secret the city whispers when the curtains are closed. Blossom's strategy is a blanket she can pull over the whole map of Townsville, tucking in each corner until the streets stop fidgeting. Bubbles' kindness is a nightlight on every porch, even when the bulbs are out. A tune that finds frightened things and teaches them how to breathe. Buttercup's courage is the lock on the door that clicks with love, the one that makes even the wind mind its manners. Together, they do not just save the day. They domesticate the dark. Somewhere on a rooftop, a certain monkey with a brain the size of borrowed hubris mutters in his sleep about revenge and then turns over and hugs his pillow because it is soft and does not judge. Somewhere beneath a bridge, a red-voiced whisper that likes to frighten itself curls into the safer shape of a neutral breeze. Somewhere in an alley, a gang of monsters compares trading cards and remembers their bedtime. Townsville's villains are loud at noon, but even their shadows have a curfew imposed by the gentle weight of 3 small heroes snoring in chorus. In their room, the capes catch the moon and fold it into pastel shoelaces. The night window shows a reflection of 3 girls growing, Blossom on her side with the thoughtful crease between her brows smoothed away, Bubbles on her back, smiling at a ceiling only she can see, where clouds are always the shape of friends. Buttercup on her stomach, one arm thrown wide like a punch she didn't need to throw, palm open, fingers relaxed, as if she has agreed to rest her strength and let the house hold it for her until morning. The professor closes their door most of the way and leaves the exact amount of space a promise needs. He returns to the lab and opens a notebook with a green elastic band. The first page is full of equations that turned into giggles. The second page is a shopping list for school lunches. The third page is blank and waiting, a soft square of tomorrow. He sets his pen down. The hum of the lab lowers one note. The refrigerator adds a friendly harmony, and in the quiet stack of counters and glassware, the house begins to dream along with its family. Here is the sleepy lore the city tells itself when the clock leans past midnight. Townsville was built on bedrock and blueprints, yes, but it also rests on pink and blue and green arcs drawn across the sky until even the stars learn a new routine. It rests on the way three sets of eyes scan the horizon and then return home without bringing the horizon's worries back with them. It rests on breakfasts that start with laughter, on lunches packed with notes that say you've got this, on dinners where the day's biggest rescue is the professor remembering to sit down with his daughters and let the casserole cool at its own pace. When the hotline stays quiet this long, another promise wakes up instead. The promise that it is all right to be small and safe while the world does its spinning. The mayor's hat leans on the back of a chair and dreams of being a lampshade. The Townsville sign at the city limits glows just bright enough to lead anyone home who forgot to turn. The night keeps its secrets, but the good ones are easy to guess. And so the city tucks itself in fully at last. The lab hum makes a soft bow. The nightlight gives one gentle blink and returns to its glow. Three girls breathe in three tempos that still manage to rhyme. Upstairs, a red bow, a blue braid, and a green scowl relax into the same shape. Belonging. Downstairs, a man who wanted to make something perfect and accidentally got something better whispers goodnight to a house that answers goodnight back. The city hears it and repeats the phrase to every window, every alley, every rooftop, until even the dreams of villains are briefly kind. Beneath the quiet house, the lab keeps a promise it made the day three little girls first opened their eyes. It promises to be bright without being harsh, clever without being proud, and busy only when it helps everyone sleep better afterward. Tonight it keeps that promise with a low, steady hum that makes the glassware lean toward one another like friends telling soft jokes. On the counter, three beakers sit in a row, each with a ribbon of color that feels familiar even if you do not know why. A blush of pink that thinks in plans and tidy lists. A sky blue ripple that smiles first and asks questions kindly. A leaf green swish that stands its ground and keeps the door locked against anything mean. The colors do not glow. They simply exist the way comfort exists, present without asking for applause. The chalkboard wears a field of neat handwriting, not formulas tonight, but lists that know how to take care of a morning. Lunches prefabricated, show and tell items remembered, extra sweater in case the wind is playful. The professor moves his hand across each line and the chalk dust lifts like patient fireflies. He is not inventing anything new tonight. He is tuning what already works, the way you tune a piano that has carried too many songs and would like to hear itself sing in perfect pitch again. On a shelf nearby, the old recipe rests. Sugar, spice, everything nice. People like to stop reading there because it makes a good ending, but the recipe is longer in ways that do not fit in a jar. Sugar is the way Blossom listens for the part of a problem that is scared and speaks to that part first. Spice is the way Buttercup shrinks a monster by refusing to be impressed by its noise. Everything nice is the way Bubbles remembers the cashier's name and the way the cashier stands a little straighter after hearing it. Chemical X sits in the story, too. A blot of ink the size of a galaxy, the unknown that turned three good ideas into three beating hearts. If you look closely tonight, Chemical X looks like moonlight that has learned manners. Upstairs, the girls sleep in their separate ways. Blossom curls around a book she finished for the 5th time because finishing is part of who she is. It helps her mind agree to rest. She dreams in maps that lead to warm kitchens and sturdy bridges with railings just the right height. Bubbles sleeps on her back with one hand lifted, as if waving to whatever dream needs a friend. She dreams in colors that have not been named yet, and will not mind if no one ever names them. Buttercup sprawls across the bed with one leg off the edge, like a guard who knows the night has already surrendered. She dreams in rooms where fear shows up at the door and is sent away with a sandwich and directions home. In Pokey Oaks, the classroom has its own bedtime. Miss Keene's whiteboard keeps the last halo of its day, and the eraser rests like a small pillow. The class pets curl into the safe corners of their cages and hear faint echoes of 3 small voices that promise to see them tomorrow. Crayons lie in their box like little rooftops, all the colors in a tidy street. Out in Townsville Park, the fountain lowers its voice until it becomes a story the grass can fall asleep to. The swing set quits its creak and becomes a line of quiet commas. Villains keep a different bedtime, but bedtime still comes. Mojo Jojo's observatory looks out over the streets with a sigh that does not make it to his mouth. On his table, a new plan sits in pieces. He lines them up in measured rows that will look threatening in the morning, but for now are only tidy. He wipes a fingerprint from a polished gadget and does not admit that clean things make him feel peaceful. He lies down and faces the window so he can keep an eye on a city that needs him to lose sometimes, which is a kind of companionship he cannot name. Down in the part of the city where laughter comes with a little dust, the gangrene gang counts streetlights and loses track at 4 because 4 is a good number to fall asleep on. Fuzzy Lumpkin sets a banjo against the porch and tells it good night as if it were a loyal dog. Princess crawls into a mountain of pillows and declares victory over the day, while her butler quietly wins the actual victory, which is switching off the light without waking her up. Back in the lab, the professor brings a kettle to a small boil that never reaches a fuss. He pours water into a mug he bought on a day when the girls made him 3 hand-drawn coupons. Good for 1 extra nap. Good for 1 day without inventing. Good for 1 hug that lasts as long as it takes. 2 of the coupons are clipped under a magnet shaped like a heart with a lightning bolt through it. The 3rd is in his pocket and worn at the edges because he uses it when no one is looking. He walks to a workbench and opens a drawer where small projects sleep. A broken toy repaired and waiting for a breakfast surprise. A science fair poster that will become a forest of bright letters. A tiny cape with a star stitched on the corner just in case Buttercup decides she likes stars after all, which she will not, but it will be there. He closes the drawer and the click is pleasant. The lab takes the sound and files it under reassurance. Every house has a nighttime rhythm if you stay quiet long enough to hear it. The Utonium house measures the night in the way the refrigerator breathes and the floorboards answer and the furnace settles and the clock admits the minutes are safe to pass. The lab adds its own line to the song. It hums at a pitch that keeps disasters asleep and ideas dozing at the edge of good behavior. It hums at a pitch that makes the hotline feel comfortable, not ringing. Midnight turns into its gentler cousin, and the city leans deeper into its pillow. The professor checks on the girls. He tucks Blossom's book a fraction of an inch away from her cheek, so the corner will not leave a mourning line. He moves Bubbles' hand to her chest, so her wave can become a rest. He lifts Buttercup's dangling foot back onto the bed, and the foot does not argue because the world feels trustworthy. He kisses 3 foreheads, and the room answers with a small warmth that is not the heater and not the light and not anything you can label, which makes it the best kind of science. He returns to the lab and switches off the big overheads, leaving only the lamps that know their places. In this softer light, the beaker's colors look less like symbols and more like themselves. Pink that reads the room and adjusts. Blue that refuses to give up on someone's better self. Green that stands guard with tenderness, disguised as stubborn. He writes one last line on the chalkboard. Sleep is preparation. The words look right, and no one will erase them in the morning because everyone already believes them. Outside Townsville holds. The skyline becomes the outline of a sleeping giant, and the giant is benign. The river keeps its course the way a lullaby keeps its melody. The traffic lights blink through their cycle for empty intersections because routine can be kindness when there is no audience. On a hill far away, a meteor that meant trouble last month burns up quietly in another sky. The universe can be dramatic when you are watching and courteous when you need rest. The lab hum lowers another notch. It meets the exact frequency of 3 steady heartbeats above. It meets the exact softness of a city that trusts its own bedtime. It meets the exact patience of a recipe that learned to be a family. Sugar settles, spice settles, everything nice settles. The unknown sits down between them and behaves. In the morning there will be work to do and weight to lift and noise to sort. Tonight there is a bowl of calm large enough to hold the whole map of Townsville without anything spilling. When the professor finally turns out the last lamp, he does not leave the room darker. He leaves it stored with light the way a pantry stores summer. The hum persists even without a switch, because some comforts do not depend on electricity. He climbs the stairs and the house gives him back each step he takes, a quiet trade of trust going both ways. At the top he looks down the hall and sees 3 doors and a nightlight, and feels the rarest kind of pride, the kind that does not need telling. The city hears the last hinge settle. The park hears the last bench stop thinking. The hotline hears the last worry and waits until morning. The lab hears the last pencil roll up to a stop and smiles in its mechanical way. Everything is ready for sleep, and everything has a reason to wake. That is the balance the girls keep without knowing they are keeping it. That is the science the professor loves most. That is the lore Townsville learns by heart as the night reaches its gentlest hour and holds there, steady and sure, until the first thin edge of dawn shows up like a ribbon on the window. Dawn touches Townsville with the back of its hand, and the city turns over for 5 more gentle minutes. The river wears a ribbon of light. The crosswalks whisper not yet. Above the roofs, the sky remembers the arcs that 3 small capes drew yesterday, and decides to keep those shapes for a while, like chalk lines you do not wash away because they make the neighborhood kinder. Blossom is first to the window. She breathes on the glass and draws a tiny map of the morning, not streets and alleys, but the softest routes. Take off from the back porch, a curve around the bakery for the smell of warm bread. A dip over the park to wake the ducks without startling them, then a slow climb out where the sun gathers in a bowl above the water. Bubbles slides in beside her and adds small stars where the best clouds might be. Buttercup yawns like a door and taps the corners that require watchfulness. Together, the drawing looks like a lullaby that puts the sky to sleep just enough to make it friendly. They tiptoe so the wood remembers good manners, and then the door opens, and the air says good morning to 3 capes at once. The professor holds the frame a second longer than necessary because seeing them pass through it is a kind of science that never gets old. Then they are up, souls leaving the porch with the ease of a sentence that knows where it's going. The sky accepts them like a lake receiving 3 smooth stones, ripples overlapping in pink and blue and green. Today the clouds are cooperative pillows arranged in lanes. Blossom takes the lead, and the others fall into her rhythm without hearing a command. She thinks in horizons and keeps the sun at their backs, so the city below wears a warm face. Bubbles leans toward a bank of soft white and listens. She hears the static of old cartoons and the hush of faraway shores and lets a tiny laugh out because the sky has the same sense of humor every morning. Buttercup skims the telephone wires just close enough to remind the pigeons that someone is on patrol. The pigeons nod with professional respect. As they loop past Pokey Oaks, the schoolyard opens its arms. The swing set glints. The hopscotch grid glows, chalk dust still dreaming in its boxes. Miss Keene sets a mug on the windowsill and smiles into the bright, as if she can feel 3 shadows cross the floor at once. In a classroom drawer, a gold star curls at the corner. Sure, it will find a paper worthy of shining on today. They pass over the last houses, and the city lets go of its edges, leaving room for the big sky. Up here, flight isn't speed. It's handwriting. Blossom writes reassurance in even strokes. Bubbles dots the eyes of morning with tiny somersaults that make everything below feel noticed. Buttercup underlines the whole line with one bold sweep that says nothing bad is allowed to get between these letters. The air gathers these strokes and mixes them into a color the sky did not know it needed. It is not pink or blue or green. It is the color of safety, and it is gentle enough to sit on your eyelashes without bothering your eyes. The hotline stays silent in the professor's pocket. He takes it with him to the porch anyway and sits where he can see a sliver of their flight whenever the house makes space between slats of sunlight. He has learned the city's quiet grammar. No ring means all is well. No ring means eat breakfast before it is cold. No ring means keep adjusting your plans until they fit inside peace. From a rooftop observatory, a certain caped simian scowls at the peaceful morning and feels inexplicably soothed by it. He holds a metal thing meant to menace and finds that polishing it is more satisfying. He leans on his elbows and watches 3 comets file the sky into sense. There are blueprints on his table for a machine that changes colors to cause panic. He folds the corner of the page without committing and notices with discomfort that he prefers Townsville in the new color he cannot name. Down in the park, Fuzzy Lumpkins picks 4 notes on a banjo and decides that is enough for today. The Gangrene Gang sleeps in odd angles against a brick wall no one will bother them for using. Princess dreams she is flying slightly faster than the girls and wakes with the certainty that she has already won. Then she looks out and sees 3 shapes moving together like a sentence with no grammatical errors, and her certainty becomes a puzzle she can attend to after cereal. The girls arc over the water and catch their reflections and see something they do not always see. They look taller when they are not trying to. Blossom sees her ribbon become an arrow that points home. Bubbles sees her pigtails make a pair of parentheses that keep the morning from falling apart. Buttercup sees her fists unclench mid-air because even the sky doesn't need defending right this second. They slow not because they are tired, but because a slower line is often stronger. When they dip lower, the city presents small errands like friendly buttons to press. A cat on a fire escape has discovered the edge of nerve. Bubbles floats by at cat-eye level and says a word the air translates into purr. A delivery truck has lost a list. Blossom traces the shortest route that still passes the donut shop, because morale matters. A gust of wind tries to lift a hat from the mayor's head for fun. Buttercup returns it to its owner with a look that teaches the gust about respect. They land on the long roof of City Hall and sit with their legs dangling over a book made of streets. Townsville turns its pages 1 block at a time. Garbage trucks make careful promises. Joggers practice staying in their lanes and forgiving themselves when they don't. A newspaper catches on a hydrant and creates an accidental headline for the pigeons that reads, "All is calm." High above, a plane draws a chalk line through a blue chalkboard, and the line looks like the beginning of a math problem whose answer is enough. Blossom talks softly about a plan that will make afternoons smoother for everyone. Nothing grand, just a schedule that leaves space around the edges for small kindnesses. Bubbles tells a story about a cloud that looked like a puppy, that looked like a cloud again, and how both shapes were perfect. Buttercup points to the far neighborhood where shadows cluster and says, "We'll swing by there again just because." Their voices mix, and the sky keeps their chords the way a lake keeps the sunset after the sun has already moved on. When they push off the roof to continue, Townsville breathes in the way a house breathes when someone it loves walks from one room to the next. The flight path becomes a necklace, rooftop to lamppost, to treetop to flagpole, each bead receiving a moment of attention and giving back a bit of shine. The color of safety deepens slightly as if agreeing that it looks good on the day. At noon they slow over the park where the fountain laughs on purpose. Children point up and then point back at their sandwiches and somehow manage both with grace. The girls wave and the wave comes back to them through 100 small hands, a current that adds energy without hurry. Buttercup accidentally drops a green apple that lands in exactly the right lap. Bubbles retrieves a kite from a branch and lets it go in a way that makes the wind feel praised. Blossom catches a falling homework sheet and smooths it so the grade it will earn is still inside it. After the circuits and the stitches and the small, careful acts, the air tells them what it always tells them when morning becomes afternoon. "You can head home for now. We will keep the color." They nod because none of this requires speeches. They bank in a gentle S, and the sky reads it as "thank you," and "you're welcome" at the same time. Back at the Utonium house, the porch knows the sound of 3 gentle landings and answers with a sigh that belongs to good wood. Inside, the kitchen is practicing being a diner, and the professor is wearing an apron that pretends to be brave against jam. He sets out plates with the choreography of a man who knows how to time toast and conversation. The hotline rests on the counter like a quiet red pebble, trustworthy and ignored. At the table, Blossom mentions the afternoon map in the mild tone of someone who has already packed an umbrella for a distant cloud. Bubbles describes a bird that looked like it was made of music. Buttercup feeds a crumb to the little fear that sometimes lives near her elbow and watches it shrink to the size of a friendly bead. The professor listens the way laboratories listen when light meets glass at the perfect angle. He adds one line to each story that makes the story stick. That was thoughtful, that was kind, that was strong in the right way. After lunch, the girls take a moment in the backyard where the grass always shows up for roll call. They lie on their backs and let the sky be big while they are small, which is not a contradiction, and just a good habit. The color they taught the sky earlier has held. It reaches down through light and leaves and lays softly across their eyelids. The neighborhood hums at a pitch that sounds like contentment. A bee passes and minds its business. The clouds drift like unhurried commas. The city, feeling seen, decides to nap too. Elevators pause on floors where no one is waiting. Doorbells save their chimes for later. Even the villains set their watches to low tide. Up on the observatory roof, a grump junior, Enolius, sketches a new scheme and then, against his proudest instincts, writes a tiny note in the margin that reads, "Do not disturb the good parts." In their small backyard, 3 capes become 3 blankets. Safety, having learned its color, stays put all by itself. The wind keeps off its shoes. The sun uses its inside voice. The map of the afternoon folds into an easy square. When they rise, it will be with the simplest knowledge. They do not have to invent flight today. They only have to remember it. And when they go, the sky will keep the chalk lines until evening, proof that rest can leave a mark as strong as any rescue. Evening slides down Townsville like a curtain that knows how to land softly. Streetlights find their glow one by one and agree to be gentle with it. The bakery sends out a last ribbon of warmth and closes the door as if tucking a child into a bed made of flour and sugar. Down at the river, the surface remembers daytime sparkles and turns them into longer thoughts. Across the neighborhoods, windows lift a few inches to let the late air pass through, like a calm story moving from house to house. Bedtime stories begin their slow parade. A radio murmurs a hero tale that ends with everyone eating pie together. A grandparent's voice practices the art of pause, teaching a dragon to use its fire only to toast marshmallows. A parent reads about a train that never rushes and still arrives on time. The words drift across hedges and fences and sidewalks, small lanterns that do not need wicks. Townsville listens and lowers its shoulders. The Utonium house adds its voice to the chorus. The lab keeps its lullaby hum, while upstairs the girls take turns at the edge of 3 beds, deciding which book belongs to which mood. Blossom chooses a thin story with good bones, the kind where problems knock politely and solutions hold the door. She reads in a cadence that could balance a city hall agenda and a cup of cocoa at the same time. Bubbles opens a picture book that seems to make new illustrations as she turns the pages because she notices fresh kindness every time. Buttercup reaches for the one with a crumpled spine that has wrestled 100 evenings into calm and always comes away smiling. The professor sits in the doorway with his coffee cooling into a flavor called contentment. He tells a short tale between chapters, his favorite one, about a day in a lab that looked like any other day until a recipe became a family. In his version, there is no explosion, only a bright, surprising hello that took the shape of 3 tiny hands. The girls pretend not to know this story by heart. They love it more each time he chooses to make it gentle. Out in the city, the bedtime drift continues. The mayor's hat rests on a chair, and the mayor practices saying goodnight to the same stack of papers 3 times, because saying the words makes the words come true. Miss Bellum clicks her last note into place and lets the whole day fold itself neatly. Her office window lets out 1 sentence of fresh air that smells like pencil shavings and promise. It travels down to the street and rides a bus 3 stops for company. On a rooftop observatory, a certain genius villain discovers that polishing his plans with a soft cloth is its own kind of meditation. He stands at the window and watches the evening tint his city purple and gold. The thought arrives as unwelcome as it is undeniable. It would be a shame to shout over this. He sets the plan down and permits the night to be better at quiet than he is. Across the park, Fuzzy Lumpkins plays a tune that falls asleep in the middle in the nicest way. The Gangrene Gang leans against warm brick, listening to a radio that cannot be bothered to finish a song, and nobody minds. Princess surveys her glittering room like a queen deciding to pardon the kingdom from noise. She pretends it is for her own sake. Everyone knows it is a gift to Townsville. Even the red whisper from under a bridge relaxes into something between a sigh and a breeze and decides there will be time enough tomorrow to be dramatic. Windows go on whispering. Townhouses pass a rumor that the moon will be full next week and recommends planning picnics. Apartment buildings trade recipes for cocoa and the kind of cookies that hold together in milk. Houses with porches agree that the best sound is a screen door closing, as if it knows exactly how much effort to use. In the alleys, cats patrol their small maps and report no emergencies besides the kind solved by a saucer. The hotline on the Utonium end table glows like a cherry that prefers to stay a cherry instead of becoming a firework. Blossom looks at it once and looks away, trusting its judgment. Bubbles opens her window an extra inch so the stuffed animals can hear the neighborhood story time. Buttercup sits on the sill and listens for any heart still beating too loudly, ready to tap it down a notch with a look that means you're safe. Try softer. A bicycle bell dings twice and then not again. A train sighs at a crossing and continues as if it has remembered to be a river for a few minutes. The park fountain slows its syllables until its sentences end in periods instead of exclamation points. A dog 3 streets over gives a single edit to the night and is satisfied with the revision. The city has learned that quiet is not the absence of life. It is life at a comforting volume. Back in the girls' room, the stories are doing their best work, which is making sleep feel like a decision rather than a defeat. Blossom marks a page with a ribbon, the exact color of relief. Bubbles closes her book with both palms as if thanking a bird for landing. Buttercup presses the book with the crumpled spine under her pillow, so bravery can soak into it without having to try. The professor stands, not because anything is wrong, but because tucking blankets is science that always benefits from hands-on work. He finishes the corners with the competence of a man who has solved larger problems and values this one more. The window breeze carries in another narrative, one told by the city itself. It talks about crane operators who know when to stop, and ice cream sellers who memorize favorite flavors, and bus drivers who wait an extra breath for a running kid, and neighbors who return carts to the right place, even when nobody is watching. The city tells the girls what they already know and sometimes forget. They are not the only reason things go right here. Townsville holds up its half of the sky. Buttercup hears a thud in the distance that sounds louder than it needs to be, and is halfway to standing when a second sound arrives, the sound of someone remembering. The thud turns into a shuffle, then into a laugh, then into a door closing with care. Buttercup lets her fist melt back into the mattress. This is what windows are for at night, to let proof drift in that people can lower their own volume. Blossom uses that proof like a bookend and tucks the day between 2 steady facts. Everyone tried. Everyone can rest. Bubbles whispers good night to no one in particular, and a lot of someones answer back without words. The professor dims the hallway and leaves the door exactly the right amount open, where privacy and belonging meet and shake hands. The city continues its tutoring. Street lamps teach curtains to glow kindly. Fire escapes teach potted plants how to lean into moonlight. Rooftops teach stars where to sit for the best view. The river teaches bridges how to be patient when footsteps stop in the middle for a kiss or a breath or a quiet cry that has finally found a safe spot to happen. Townsville is busy with gentle lessons, and there is not a siren among them. In the observatory, a plan is put away without resentment. On the porch in the hills, a banjo rests like a satisfied cat. In a fancy bedroom, a crown is placed on a nightstand and for once does not need to declare anything. On a loading dock, a forklift blinks its yellow light at a moth, and the moth blinks back slowly, and both decide this counts as a conversation. The loudest hearts feel seen. Seeing calms them. The Utonium house breathes in time with the block. Downstairs, the lab checks the locks and then loosens them a hair because invention sleeps better when it is not trapped. Upstairs, the girls tilt into the pose that all good sleepers learn, which is the shape of trust. 3 blankets, a line, and a soft flag no one will wave because stillness is the message. Before the hour turns, Blossom opens her eyes, not to worry, only to watch the curtain lift and fall. Bubbles smiles again at nothing she needs to explain. Buttercup reaches a hand out from under the sheet and lets it hang for a second in the cool air until the room takes her hand and holds it, and she lets go. The professor realizes his coffee has gone cold and feels oddly proud of that. Cold coffee means the night handled itself. Windows finish their lesson. The stories they carried settle into pillows and carpets and the insides of lamps. The breeze moves on to the next block, leaving the scent of lilacs where there are no lilacs and the hush of applause where there was no show to clap for. The city rests the way a giant rests without shaking the ground. Townsville's bedtime is complete. The hotline stays quiet. The porch light keeps its small circle. The lab hum leans into one last low note. In houses and apartments and places in between, hearts lower their volume and keep beating. Tomorrow will ask for speed and angles and decisions. Tonight has given muscle to the kindness that makes all of that possible. Midnight arrives without raising its voice, and Townsville answers in the same key. The streets flatten their footsteps. Storefronts fold their light into neat squares behind glass. The river keeps time by brushing the banks in patient strokes. Above it all, 3 small capes drift out of the Utonium window, not to startle the night, but to keep it company while it works. They fly low enough to listen. Blossom's eyes move like steady lanterns, reading corners and crosswalks, checking the angles where worries like to hide. Bubbles lets her palm skim the air and feels the city's mood as if it were water in a bowl. Buttercup follows the fault lines, the places where noise could wake before it's ready, and stands guard without flexing. Midnight patrol is less about catching trouble than noticing its softening. Over on Valerian Avenue, a neon sign has dozed off at a crooked angle, its buzz half a wince. Blossom floats to the bolts and tightens them in 3 calm turns, and the buzz becomes a purr. The sign sits up straighter, grateful to be allowed to sleep without complaining. No alarm, no chase, only a small rescue that keeps the morning from inheriting a headache. On Juniper Street, a cat and a garbage can negotiate loudly about ownership. Buttercup lands between them and says nothing. Her presence edits the scene. The can remembers dignity. The cat remembers balance. Both step back, and the night clicks into place again with a quiet that feels earned. Buttercup nods, which is her favorite word when words are not required. In the park, a kite forgotten on a branch gets ideas about becoming a ghost. Bubbles laughs once, the sound that teaches fearful things how to turn around. She frees the string and tucks it on a bench where Dawn will find it and return it to small hands. For good measure, she hums a tune that shows the wind how to be playful without taking anything. The trees accept the lesson and rustle in agreement. They cross the river in a straight line that remembers to curve at the end. Below, the water keeps secrets for couples on benches and joggers who promise themselves tomorrow, and teenagers talking as if the world were not listening. It is listening. It approves. Blossom notes a loose railing bolt on the footbridge and makes it right. Better to settle the worry now so the sunrise does not step into it. At the warehouse district, a single loading dock light stays on like a tooth that forgot to sleep. Buttercup eases it off with a flip that is all finesse and no showing off. Across from it, a forklift blinks once in thanks, because machines know who respects their rest. A moth circles the newly dark corner and decides to try the moon instead. Everyone upgrades. Not all noise is trouble. On a quiet cul-de-sac, a baby makes a small, sincere protest about being a person. Bubbles leans near the window and sings the gentlest version of Yes, You Are Safe that she knows, a melody shaped like rocking. Inside, shoulders lower. Outside, the streetlights dim a fraction to match the new pace. The baby chooses a sleep as if it were a game she knows how to win. They climb higher for a pass across rooftops. From here, Townsville looks like a quilt stitched by a calm hand. The observatory sits among the squares and triangles, a pointy thought that has learned to lie down at night. Through the glass, a figure in a cape turns a blueprint over and draws a single line labeled later. He does not know why this feels like winning, but it does. The girls move on without gloating. Mercy is part of how the sky stays quiet. Down near the old theater district, a marquee letter has slipped, making an accidental word that almost turns kind into kink. Blossom smiles, slides the letter back with the tip of a finger, and the marquee breathes easier. She writes a small note in her head to check the other hooks next week. Good leadership likes lists, because lists treat tomorrow as a friend. Buttercup senses a swell of noise brewing 3 blocks over, the kind that starts with a skateboard and a set of stairs. She arrives as the board tilts toward trouble and steadies it with 2 fingers. The kid looks up and meets a gaze that is firm and warm at once. She points down the wider street and makes a soft circling motion that means loop here, not there. The kid nods. The new route turns a racket into a rhythm. Somewhere, a window that would have woken stays asleep. Bubbles' path is the one animals take when they dream about kindness. A stray dog noses at a gate torn between leaving and belonging. She scratches the sweet spot behind his ear, and the decision becomes simple. He curls on a mat that reads, Welcome, and for once the mat gets to be literal. On a balcony, a parakeet fluffs into a sphere and feels watched over without being watched. The hotline rests face down on the professor's nightstand. The city has given it the evening off. He stirs once, as if to verify the quiet, then lets the house hold him up. In his dream, he fixes a problem that has already been solved, smiles at the efficiency, and keeps sleeping. Downstairs, the lab catches a draft and turns it into a softer hum. In the hallway, the nightlight leans an inch toward the girl's door and is content. Some patrols require speed and strength and voices that carry. Not tonight. Tonight they work in edits, not headlines. Blossom aligns, Bubbles soothes, Buttercup forbids the world from forgetting its better self. They string their route like a necklace across the map. A rooftop bead, a chimney bead, a stop sign bead, a treetop bead. Each place polished once and left shining without glare. The villains sleep in their varied ways, and the girls do not disturb them. Fuzzy's banjo leans, still holding the last sweet chord. Princess sleeps on a hill of pillows as high as her arguments, and looks small the nicest possible way. A shadow under a bridge remembers how to be air. The gangrene gang dreams they are good at something, and wake to discover that being quiet counts. Midnight slides toward its lighter cousin. The girls check the cul-de-sac where porch swings face each other like neighbors who remember birthdays. They float low and listen for any hinge that might squeak into tomorrow. A single swing is restless. Buttercup stills it with her palm and receives in return a tiny squeak that sounds like a thank you from a bolt. They finish where they began, above their own roof. Townsville stretches once, gets comfortable, and chooses the second half of the night. The color of safety they taught the sky this morning has cooled into a calm that fits like a favorite shirt. Blossom makes one last circuit with her eyes, drawing a box around the city and signing it with care. Bubbles blows a quiet kiss into the dark, and it lands in 100 places at once. Buttercup lingers half a heartbeat longer, making certain the loudest corners have learned to whisper. They have. They slip back through the window and into the room where 3 beds remember their shapes. They settle in with the muscle memory of a story finding its last line. Down the hall, the professor turns over and unconsciously counts to 3, an old habit that still fits. The house adds another layer of stillness, thin as silk and strong as a seatbelt. Townsville sleeps. The river keeps the minutes. The lab hum keeps the promises. The hotline keeps its red, respectful glow. Above everything, the sky keeps the lines the girls drew on it earlier, softer now but present, like pencil marks under a watercolor wash. Morning is on its way, and it will arrive to find fewer sharp edges because midnight carried a file. Dawn lifts the lid on Townsville 1 careful inch. Streetlights loosen their glow without letting it spill. The river rehearses its daytime sparkle and decides to keep some of the night's patience. The bakery sighs the first warm breath of the morning, and the air remembers every cinnamon dream from last night. Windows brighten from inside out, a neighborhood of lanterns agreeing without discussion to be kind. In the Utonium house, a clock chooses the gentlest way to mention the hour. The lab hum shifts to a key that means good morning. The hotline sits like a cherry that slept well. Upstairs, 3 alarms are replaced by 3 instincts. Blossom wakes with a tidy plan already softened at the edges so it can fit around surprises. Bubbles wakes, smiling at a ceiling where clouds have learned the shape of friends. Buttercup wakes the way a guard dog does when it knows the yard is fine and the gate is sturdy and there is time to stretch. The house performs its small choreography. Slippers find feet. Toothbrushes find the rhythm they practiced. Ribbons remember their knots without tangling. The mirror takes a quick attendance of a red bow, 2 blue pigtails, and a green scowl that is more tradition than mood. The hall smells lightly of soap and something warm on a skillet. When the girls step into the kitchen, the professor is there with pancakes arranged like planets, a solar system that takes syrup politely and spins at the speed of conversation. Breakfast is the first rescue of the day. The professor slides a plate to Blossom, and she adds a note about the afternoon to her mental map, then decides to tuck a longer break between 2 errands because rest is part of good leadership. He adds a berry smile to Bubbles' plate, and she tells him the color the sky learned yesterday, and he nods as if taking a measurement he means to keep. He flips a pancake onto Buttercup's dish, hits the center like landing on a rooftop you've sized up from a block away, and Buttercup pretends not to be impressed by accuracy that feels like love. Lunches click closed with the neatness of ideas that will not rattle around later. The professor tucks a short sentence into each bag. For Blossom, you don't have to fix everything to have fixed something. For Bubbles, your kindness changes outcomes. For Buttercup, you are strongest when you choose where to stand. The sentences are neither homework nor orders. They are handlebars for the day. Out on the porch, the morning sits with its elbows on its knees, ready to be useful. The girls step into it, and the boards answer with the respectable creak of good wood. Flight begins without fanfare, 3 colors rising from the same square of shade and parting like threads that know how to weave. The sky recognizes them and returns the color it saved overnight, now a little brighter, as if sleep polished it. Their first circuit is short on purpose. Dawn belongs to small things done right. Blossom slows over the main intersection and adjusts the crosswalk signal that blinked too quickly yesterday. Now it waits long enough for a stroller and a story. Bubbles drifts by the bus stop and reminds a Wendy advertisement it does not need to leave its frame. Buttercup lands beside a newspaper box that tried to stick and persuades the latch to behave with a tap that means we both have better things to do. They check the park before the first sneakers arrive. A slide has collected a shy puddle. Bubbles invites the sun to take care of it, and the sun obliges. A swing's chain hums at the wrong pitch. Buttercup twists it half a turn, and the note drops into tune. At the drinking fountain, Blossom cleans the button the way she organizes a list, bringing order without making a speech. When families arrive, the equipment will seem quietly competent. That is the work. Pokey Oaks opens its windows to let last night's stories out and today's lessons in. Miss Keene glances up and sees 3 brief commas in the sky where the girls pause to appreciate the classroom plants. She waters them with a smile that adds an extra leaf to each stem. Inside, crayons line up like little rooftops again. The bell waits for its first polite ring, and a gold star in the drawer sits ready without needing to be promised to anyone yet. Across town, the mayor reads a sentence he wrote to himself last night and decides it is still true. Miss Bellum ties her hair with the efficiency of a thesis statement and files 2 emergencies under not this morning because they are already solved by the sun being up and everyone acting like they live here. On the observatory roof, a certain villain steps into daylight and watches the city stretch, then folds last night's plan along the crease that reads later and for once means it. The girls slow above City Hall and sit with their legs over the edge the way kids do, who trust their balance and their town. From here, the city is a book beginning a new chapter. Garbage trucks keep their promises with the dignity of elephants. Sprinklers add punctuation to lawns. A jogger waves without breaking stride, a kindness that costs nothing and buys a lot. The fountain in the square upgrades from night's murmurs to morning's laughter, and neither is better. Both are correct. Blossom reviews the day's map aloud in a voice that fits both council chambers and kitchen tables. She leaves white space around lunchtime on purpose. Bubbles points out a cloud shaped like a good idea, and the cloud, being a good sport, holds the shape long enough for everyone to see it. Buttercup marks 2 corners where impatience likes to live and nods to herself. A look placed there at the right moment will be enough. They make a second circuit, not as patrol but as gratitude, touching the beads of yesterday's necklace. Rooftop, lamppost, treetop, flagpole. Each place gives back a fraction of the polish it received at midnight. The color of safety, now threaded through the morning, looks like clear crosswalks and patient brake lights and runners who glance over shoulders for cyclists and cyclists who appreciate it. It looks like 1,000 small negotiations ending in, "Yes, you first." The Utonium porch gets the soft thunder of 3 homecomings, and inside the house the floor answers like a friend shifting to make room on the couch. The professor is waiting with a thermos and 3 straws and a pride that does not need announcements. He asks nothing, not because he does not care, but because the silence is full of what he already knows. The lab ticks once like a satisfied instrument finding perfect tune. Before the day takes its full speed, there is a last ritual. The girls stand at the kitchen window, and the glass holds their reflections with just enough blur to make the future look friendly. Blossom smooths the ribbon that points forward. Bubbles lifts her hand as if waving to whatever needs a greeting. Buttercup rolls a shoulder and lets it relax, choosing where to keep her strength. The hotline remains a quiet ruby on the counter. It will call if it must. It prefers to approve. They shoulder backpacks that fit their sizes and their destinies at the same time, which is some of the best design in Townsville. On the steps, shoes tie themselves a little tighter than usual. On the sidewalk, the day waits, in a shape that is not a challenge but an invitation. Across the street, a kid drops a pencil and another kid picks it up without keeping score. Everywhere, the city practices the art of beginning without rushing. On the way to school, they pass the park once more and see the swing they tuned, carrying someone whose feet point at the sky as if spelling yes. They pass the river and watch a couple pause on the footbridge where the bolt is right and share a smile that looks like a decision. They pass the bakery and catch a new wave of warmth that drapes over the sidewalk like a blanket. The air says eat well, be kind, learn something, come home. By the time the bell rings, Townsville is fully awake and not one bit less gentle for it. The girls take their seats as if they had not just done all of this, because doing all of this is not a crown to wear. It is a habit to keep. Miss Keene smiles at the room in a way that includes 3 superheroes and a dozen more kids who will save the day with words and art and patience and good questions. The board holds the day's lesson. The windows hold the color of safety for later. Center Tucker. Back at the house, the lab hum shifts to a tune that suits daytime tinkering. The hotline rests. The porch counts shadows and makes a note for afternoon. The city gets on with it, sustained by a night that went well and a morning that honored that fact. Villains make lists with fewer exclamation points. Buses stop close enough to curbs for easy steps. Crosswalks keep secrets about how many tiny acts of grace happened in a single minute, and tell no one because grace does not brag. This is how Townsville prefers to wake. No fanfare, no speeches, just 3 small capes that understand the discipline of gentle and a city that cooperates. There will be rescues today that ask for speed and noise and force used in service of peace. The foundation for those rescues is being poured right now in pancakes and porch boards and fixed latches and polite intersections and classrooms where names are said kindly the first time. When noon leans forward and the sky brightens to full, the traces of the night's quiet work remain, invisible if you rush, obvious if you breathe. The color the girls taught the sky is still there, woven to the day like a careful thread you only see when the light hits right. It will be there tonight, too, ready to soften to the kind of dusk that teaches windows to whisper and streets to lower their voice. And so the sleepy lore of the Powerpuff Girls closes its circle the way all good circles do, pointing back to where it began, a house that hums, a lab that listens, a hotline that trusts the calm it helped create, a city that remembers it is capable of kindness even when no capes are in sight, 3 sisters who carry speed in their bones and gentleness in their hands and know when to use which. Rest made all of this possible. Rest will make the next heroic thing possible, too. For now, Townsville is awake, and it is peaceful, and the day knows how to be soft where it can and strong where it must. Now we will move to adventure time. A wind chime made from bottle caps flutters once and stills. Somewhere, a sword clicks back into its sheath as if it has decided to become a bookmark. A ladybug rides a dandelion seed and chooses not to land just yet. The meadow between one thought and another holds perfectly still. And then, adventure time. The tree. Fort blinks its window lights to a lower glow, the kind that says the day can keep talking, but only in a whisper. Inside, a blue mug cools on a table, ringed by old stories. BMO hums a tune that feels like a cat curling into a square made of sun. Finn stands by the open hatch with his pack already light, as if the quest slid out when he wasn't looking and turned into feathers. Jake stretches in the doorway, becoming a doormat and then a couch, and then exactly the shape of best friend. The air smells like apples and quiet heroism. Outside, ooze softens its colors. The Candy Kingdom sets its turret lollipops to patient. Peppermint guards lean their spears against their shoulders and practice nodding politely to dreams as they walk past. In the distance, a mountain sighs in snow, and the snow decides to fall later. The sky wears a tiny crown of first stars and keeps the rest in its pocket like marbles. Finn lifts his hat off for a moment, and the room hears the hush of the human who believes in everything. He places the hat on the back of a chair like a promise he'll be right back. Jake pats the floor beside him with a paw that is also a pillow, then narrows into a long golden scarf and loops once around Finn's shoulders, a practiced way of saying calm. BMO sets a teacup where a controller would be and the tea behaves, leveling itself through Jake's stretch and Finn's quiet bounce, a lesson in equilibrium from a very small guru. The sleepy lore of ooh arrives on soft feet. The Enchiridion on the shelf flips a page by Breeze alone and reveals an illustration of a quest that turned into a picnic and was better that way. Marceline's bus, resting against the wall, vibrates once at the lowest possible note, the musical equivalent of a blanket being pulled up to a chin. Somewhere far off, Ice King sneezes, and the flake that would have started a storm instead becomes a polite postcard of winter mailed to a cloud that needed a friend. Finn sits cross-legged on the rug that remembers a dozen victories and mostly just remembers laughter. He says the thing he always means, whether he says it or not. I want tomorrow to be good for everyone. The tree fort creaks in a language only long-time houses know and answers, it will be. We took notes. Jake expands into a beanbag that fits the thought exactly. He produces from nowhere and from always a soft edges map of ooh made from stitched fabric. The territories are colors you can nap in. He taps the Candy Kingdom, and it glints like a sugar window. He taps the Fire Kingdom, and the fabric warms an inch away from hot, like a campfire with manners. He taps the Nightosphere, and the thread there learns to be velvet instead of teeth. They unfurl the map across the floor, and ooh tilts toward it, as if the world enjoys seeing itself in cozy. Finn traces a route that begins at their doorstep, loops past the meadow where swords become bookmarks, crosses the little creek that says please when it runs over stones, and ends at the bed that has already fluffed its own pillows. As his finger moves, tiny tokens appear along the seam. A cherry for Princess Bubblegum, a tiny crown made of tinfoil for a certain lonely wizard, a bass clef for a friend who knows how to make the dark sing. BMO hops onto the map and becomes a marker, little green light blinking right where home is. A pixel heart floats above the spot and idles. BMO speaks with the gravity of bedtime. The objective is rest. Side quests allowed, teeth brushing, story sharing, one extra drink of water. Bonus loot, tomorrow. Finn salutes, solemn and delighted at once, and the map accepts the mission. They step outside onto the branch deck. Ooh breathes out, and the leaves make the sound of 100 gentle yeses. The moon lifts its face over the hills like a friend arriving without knocking. Jake lengthens to a bridge that reaches from the deck to the top of the nearest starflower. Finn walks across him like you'd walk across a sentence you trust. From this height, the landscape is a quilt. Gumdrop lights flicker like quiet village gossip. A herd of cloud deer drifts and sheds antlers made of rain that decide they are not needed. They begin the smallest, best patrol. No monsters, no bosses, only the ritual of noticing that everything is still here. Finn waves toward the Candy Kingdom, and the peppermints wave back, and the wave continues window to window until the castle is covered in kindness. Princess Bubblegum, deep in a lab that hums like a lullaby, glances up toward the fort as if she can hear the wave and lets one experiment end at exactly the correct comma. In the Fire Kingdom, a blaze lowers itself from roar to purr so even lava can sleep. In the Ice Kingdom, Gunter dreams an egg that hatches into a tiny top hat, and keeps it. Back at the fort, Jake shrinks to the shape of a cushion under Finn's knees. He tugs the soft edges map up to their laps. The patches glow with stored stories. Finn presses the stitched comet trail that once taught him to be brave in a new direction, and it glows a dim honey color called You Did Right. He taps the tree stitched for the time he learned that endings and beginnings wear the same barks. The thread warms his finger. Jake, without comment, adds a patch of plain blue for doing nothing heroic at all and being worthwhile anyway. Marceline appears in the doorway like a shadow that chose to be nice. She doesn't ask to come in. She's already family where doorways are suggestions. She sits on the windowsill and tunes a string down, 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 until it matches the slow breath of the room. She sings a song about apples that don't fall far and still roll exactly where they need to, about friends who can hear each other from across a whole weird world, about nights that behave. Finn leans his head back until it rests against the wood. The fort listens. The stars come closer, like kids trying to catch the chorus. When the last note becomes a soft line of air, Marceline grins with one fang and vanishes sideways in that way she has, leaving the window a little more open than before. Mao dims to a campfire glow and sets a tiny pixel clock to the speed of comfort. A breeze wanders through, checks the room is arranged correctly, and exits with commendations. Finn yawns, the kind that starts in your socks and climbs ladders behind your eyes. The yawns of ooh echo it back in miniature. A cinnamon bun in the Candy Kingdom yawns frosting. A rabbit by the creek yawns and becomes a lighthouse of whiskers for 1 second. A distant rock troll yawns and accidentally organizes his pebbles in soothing rows. Jake pats Finn's shoulder with the corner of a paw, as soft as a cloud with manners. Before they sleep, they play a last round of What If, the bedtime version that never gets anyone too excited. What if the Ice King learns to knit cozies for snowflakes so they fall in slow motion? What if the Fire Kingdom's sparks turn into fireflies at the border and write thank you in the air? What if BMO dreams us a save point right here? BMO blinks, then declares game saved with a pleased beep. The fort seems to nod. Finn pulls the blanket up. It smells like grass and victory and laundry. Jake becomes exactly the blanket Finn needs, warm where bravery cooled and heavy where thoughts were fluttering. The soft edges map folds itself and tucks under the bed like an obedient dog made of cloth. The Enchiridion closes its eyes. The window says good night to the moon, and the moon says it back. Ooh chooses a quieter font. The Candy Kingdom's lights settle to cordial. The Fire Kingdom wears a screen of ember stars. The Ice Kingdom snows in cursive. Far away, a wolf writes a poem by accident and never shows anyone, and that is fine. Closer, the tree fort's floorboards remember dancing and choose to sway only in dreams. Finn says one more sentence to the kind of night that listens. Thanks for the weird, thanks for the good. Jake answers the way best friends do when words are pillows. BMO adds an achievement sticker to the corner of the moment, and then hides it where only morning will find it. Sleep climbs the ladder. The fort holds still. Ooh keeps watch, not as a guard, but as a friend who knows the route to morning and will walk it with you at exactly your pace. A lollipop turret clicks one notch softer. A cotton candy banner loosens its knot and drapes the wall like a yawn that learned manners. Down the main lane, sugar cobblestones decide to squeak 1 time fewer per footstep. The Candy Kingdom is practicing the art of being sweet without being loud. Princess Bubblegum stands at her bench with a beaker the color of late sunset and a notebook that always lands open to exactly the right page. She stirs in a figure 8 and listens for the sound only she can hear, the hush that means the mixture has learned to be kind. A tiny device on the counter measures sweetness in a new unit she invented for nights like this, lullabies per milliliter. The needle climbs to a mark named just right and stays there as if proud of itself. She smiles the smile that makes the air near her tidy itself. Outside, peppermint guards ease their shoulders and hold their halberds a little closer to the floor, discovering that a weapon can also be a shepherd's staff if your job is to guide dreams to safe places. One guard tries the phrase "good evening" in a voice made of velvet and peppermint, and decides that will be the phrase for the next hour. Lanterns above the path lower to cordial, brushing light across gumdrop hedges in stripes that look like a bedtime sweater. Finn and Jake arrive at the gate exactly when they meant to without trying. PB lifts her goggles and sees them the way a town sees its steeple, relieved and grateful and used to the feeling. She snaps the notebook shut with a soft pop that registers as mission done in 3 languages. Finn accepts a beaker that steams like tea and tastes like courage with sugar. Jake's tongue becomes a thermometer and reads perfectly cozy. BMO toddles along behind, pockets full of pixel stickers that award achievements for perfectly ordinary kindnesses. PB pinches one and places it on BMO's corner with precise affection. Best small lantern. The square fills with end-of-day errands that have learned to walk instead of run. Cinnamon Bun carries a tray of rolls that glow at the edges like daylight that chose to stay. He hands one to a child who counts sprinkles before eating, then counts fewer than usual because counting is a loud game and he loves that he can play it tomorrow. Mr. Cupcake lumbers by, flexes once with admirable restraint, and uses his strength to move a bench 2 inches so it faces the moon. This, he tells the moon, is us making room for you. PB leads them past the fountain where the water decides to land more like commas than exclamation points. She taps a control valve gently. The stream obeys. You can have science and peace at the same time, she says. And Finn nods with the relief of someone who wants both and often gets them because of the person standing next to him. Jake lengthens into a low railing that shows a toddler where not to tumble, and the toddler, in the proud tradition of toddlers, decides to cooperate tonight. In the clinic, the last thermometer returns to its drawer and the drawer closes without fuss. PB checks a small chart on the wall, a sweetness map of the kingdom. The numbers are lower where sugar rushes used to climb at bedtime, higher where bedtime used to arrive shy. She places a sticker shaped like a tiny crown on a quadrant labeled "Cull to Sugar" and writes one small word beside it, "Balanced." In another corner of the clinic, a bowl of lollipops wears a sign that says, "For tomorrow." And, as if the idea traveled from a certain cul-de-sac in a different neighborhood, kids walk by and nod to it like a promise. Peppermint Butler glides past with a stack of books bound in floss and string. He has a secret that has chosen to have soft edges tonight. He bows to PB with a twirl that looks suspiciously like ballroom etiquette learned from midnight, then bends toward BMO and whispers an ancient candy proverb that turns out to be a bedtime shelf-straightening tip. When in doubt, put all the good stories where hands can reach without a step stool. BMO salutes. 2 pixel hearts blink in approval and then dim to nightlight. They reach the classroom where PB teaches the younger gumdrops how to measure kindness the way other kids measure flour. She has chalked the board with tidy letters. K is for keep it gentle. I is for include the shy. N is for notice the small. D is for do it again. The class repeats in small voices that do not travel beyond the door. In the back, Finn holds Jake like a scarf and mouths the words along. Because practice feels nice, even after you know the lesson. A soft procession begins down the main lane. Guards at the corners trade posts with the kind of a nod that says, "I've got it, and also I've got you." PB sprinkles 3 drops from her lullaby beaker into the air above the bakery, and the scent walks itself to the edges of the square, tucking in benches and awnings and the stray toy someone will remember later. Finn keeps a palm on the hilt of his sword, not to use it, but to remind it that the world is allowed to sleep. The sword decides to be heavy in a protective way. Princess Bubblegum stops at a small kiosk where a jellybean clerk is handing out tiny cards. Each card reads, "Bedtime Science. Pass." The back says you participated in a safe night. Sign here. Finn signs with a sketch of a tiny star. Jake signs with a loop that looks like a donut that learned to write. BMO stamps the corner with a green light that means archived. They pass the Candy Hospital's quiet ward. Inside, a taffy patient practices deep breaths that stretch and release. PB adjusts the blind so moonlight becomes soft stripes on the floor. She hums a tune with no words, the one that reminds sugar to be kind to itself. Outside, the clock above the gate blinks and remembers to move only when no one is watching. Time agrees to be gentle in 15-minute chapters. On the ramparts, 2 peppermint guards test the new procedure PB wrote this evening. Instead of calling out "all's well," they say something smaller because "all is well" can feel like a shout. The first tries the phrase, "It's quiet and good." The second answers, "I'm here if you need." The words travel along the wall and lose none of their shape. Inside, an old caramel unknots a little because the sentences were not large and yet were enough. Jake grows into a bench and Finn sits. PB sits too, and for half a minute becomes Bonnabelle, the girl whose first lab was a mixing bowl and a promise. She looks at her city the way a baker looks through the oven door at something that is almost ready and will become perfect if you do not open the door too soon. She does not open the door. She waits, and the kingdom rises. The square reaches that moment night always looks for, the tiny click when the world chooses rest. A cotton candy cloud passes over the castle and leaves a line of sugar that dissolves before anyone reaches for a broom. Peppermint Butler sets the stack of floss-bound books on a stoop and steps back to watch the first reader pick one up in the morning. Cinnamon Bun attaches a note to the bakery door that reads, "Tomorrow's cinnamon already understands." Princess Bubblegum stands and shares the beaker with Finn, with Jake, with BMO, then tips the last drop into the fountain. The surface smooths like a page turned carefully. She marks the experiment complete in her head with a single neat word. Success. She adds a second word because science and love are allowed to share the same clipboard. Sweet. They walk to the gate together. PB places a hand on Finn's shoulder, on Jake's back, on BMO's little plastic top, grateful in the practical way that sets whole kingdoms at ease. Finn tilts his head toward the fort in the distance and hears, more than sees, the tree fort saying, "And come back when you like." Jake becomes a bridge for exactly 3 steps over a puddle that formed from a spilled juice and reflects the moon like it means it. BMO skips once in a circuit only BMO understands and writes tonight saved in a folder that always has room. Behind them, the Candy Kingdom lowers its voice the rest of the way. Lamps ease into night mode. The fountain practices commas again. The guards lean on their halberds and look like shepherds who have counted every sheep and include themselves. The square gathers its crumbs of noise into a napkin and folds it for later. PB smiles back at her city, and the city, being well raised, smiles back. On the path to the tree fort, Grass remembers a footstep from this morning and adjusts to fit it again, proof that the world likes gentle habits. The creek tells a single joke to a pebble, and the pebble promises not to repeat it. Finn tightens the strap of his pack exactly one hole less than tight, because nights are for not squeezing. Jake steals an apple from a friendly tree with the kind of theft trees expect from friends, and slides it into Finn's hand. BMO hums the tune PB used in the clinic until even the crickets keep time. At the latter, PB gives one last report to the dark the way good leaders do. Sugar rush is minimized. Good nights maximized. We can sleep now. The dark answers with the sound of leaves agreeing. She heads home across the meadow, lab coat turned to cape by a cooperative breeze, already designing the next morning's gentle proofs. The tree fort opens its door a fraction wider than usual as Finn steps inside. Jake returns to blanket shape without being asked. BMO clicks to the brightness setting called kindness. Ooh changes fonts again from cordial to quiet. The Candy Kingdom glows on the horizon like a nightlight someone left on for the whole map. The beaker of lullabies is empty and the kingdom is full. Finn and Jake stand at the rim where stone remembers Bean River. Heat moves past like a dragon that has read the new rules and likes them. Finn tightens the strap of the Heat Hood Princess bubblegum, stitched from tempered thread and calm. Jake becomes oven mitt long, glove wide, then relaxes into a golden sash that drapes across Finn's shoulders, an easy promise that adjusts to the temperature and the mood. The Fire Kingdom below drops its volume a notch. Flows that once roared now murmur in iron lullabies. Vents hiss in complete sentences instead of interruptions. Along the basalt streets, ember lanterns take turns being the brightest, a little game of sharing that keeps shadows friendly. Guards of living flame set their spears to the angle that says, stay safe, not stay away. The palace shimmers, less blaze, more heartbeat. Flame Princess steps out onto a balcony, a crown of patient flame above hair that has learned 1,000 tempos. She raises a hand and the courtyard's heat bows without losing its dignity. Welcome, she says in a voice built of warmth and choices. We are trying something new. She gestures toward the throne room where a circle of obsidian has been cleared and marked with chalk that does not vaporize because it has been taught respect. Finn and Jake cross the threshold with the steady stride of friends who remember how this used to be and can feel how it is now. Etiquette, murmurs Jake, stretching into a placard that reads, 3 gentle rules. Ask the flame before you come close. Stand where the air can breathe around you. Leave cooler than you arrived. Finn salutes the sign as if it were a knight. The air approves by moving. Tonight's experiment is simple. Flame Princess wants to see if a kingdom built on burn can nap without dimming itself the way a star rests between flickers. She opens her palm. A small ember blooms there, not fierce, merely awake. Around the circle, attendants cup embers of their own, each cradled in tongs that look like chopsticks for fire. On the far wall, a slate bears 2 words written by an earlier hand, Ember Etiquette. Jake becomes 3 stools and a windbreak. Finn sits, palms open, heartbeat choosing a slower count. Flame Princess sits opposite, sets her ember above the obsidian circle, and breathes the way a forge breathes when it has nothing to prove. The ember purrs. It is a sound like rain remembered by metal. One by one, the others follow. The throne room fills with the feline hush of lit coals that have found the right size of glow. The floor understands what to do. Obsidian gives up a sliver of heat from old days and spreads it thin as a blanket under the circle. The pillars carry the warmth upward in even stair steps. A fountain of fire in the corner drops its pitch the way a singer lowers to harmony. On the balcony, fireworks that were planning to argue decide to become constellations of sparks instead, rising in order, blinking like a sequence the night can read. Finn leans closer until the edge of heat kisses his cheek and stops. "Thank you," he says to the ember. "The way you say thank you to a friend who met you halfway." Flame Princess watches the exchange with the quiet pride of a queen, evaluating a new law that is actually an old kindness. She lifts 2 fingers. Across the hall, a brazier breathes out, then in, then holds. Around them, the Fire Kingdom practices purring. At the edge of the circle, a young salamander in a crown-sized bucket of ash looks worried about his flame. Jake stretches into a friendly fence before the worry can run. Finn slides on his knees, puts his hand near the ember, not over it, lets his palm warm, then shows the salamander how to breathe so heat becomes a porch light instead of a siren. The ember rounds itself into a berry of glow. The salamander smiles and crackle. A procession arrives, citizens whose bodies are bonfires, braziers on legs, sparks in boots. They take places along the wall, careful not to star the floor. Jake unfurls into a ribbon that reads "Flame likes manners" in loopy letters. Finn demonstrates a hero bow that does not extinguish anything. Flame Princess, seeing all this land just right, raises a small bell forged from cool lightning and gives it one soft note. The note lands on the embers like snow that does not melt, only teaches silence how to shine. From the ceiling, stalactites sweat bright drops that fall into bowls of sand and go sis like polite punctuation. Outside, lava falls adjust their flow to even. Molten rivers keep to their banks the way good stories keep to a tone and still surprise you. A courier lizard pads through with a bag of glass letters and leaves a postcard beside the bell. "Message from the volcano," it says in scratchy script. "I am practicing the long inhale." The bell smiles back in metal. BMO pops out of Finn's pack, having ridden the whole way in low power mode, and peeps at the circle. BMO loves games that are actually ceremonies. Achievement idea, BMO whispers, and stamps the air with a little pixel badge that hovers above the room. Fire friend. The badge drifts once around the circle like a halo looking for a home, and then becomes a very small star that does not burn and refuses to leave a mark, which is, surprisingly, a lovely quality for a star to have. Finn closes his eyes and lets the ember light through his eyelids make a map. On it, the Candy Kingdom glows cordial, the Tree Fort glows hearthy, and here the Fire Kingdom glows cat-like, tail thumping once, then still. He opens his eyes and finds Flame Princess watching him with the secret grin of someone who has just proved a theorem about herself. He nods. She nods. The room agrees. A minor eruption grumbles at the edge of the kingdom, the way a neighbor clears a throat to apologize for starting a blender after 9. Flame Princess raises her hand, receives the apology, and returns permission in the form of a path the lava can take that will not wake any villages. Finn sketches that path in the air with a finger, and the lava, having excellent manners tonight, follows the suggestion to the letter. They try a last exercise. Each ember gets a turn at being a star. The room darkens one shade so the glow has space. Flame Princess holds her ember up and says quietly, "For the sky." A vent opens like an eyelid, and a column of night looks in. The ember, who has been listening, leaps, rises slowly like a lantern with thoughts, and joins the ceiling where other small embers have gone. They drift to the vents and out one by one, climbing the air shaft into the open, where the Fire Kingdom lends the night some stars that will burn out harmlessly by dawn and become dream crumbs on the castle roof. Jake becomes a fan and moves the air just enough to send the next ember skyward without making any other flame feel abandoned. Finn cups his hands and shields a shy spark from a draft until it decides to be brave. Flame Princess seals each vent with a nod after its ember goes, as if signing a letter. Outside, the night receives each light with a sound no one hears but everyone believes. When the circle is mostly bowls and ash and content faces, Flame Princess tilts her head. Nap time for the bright, she says. Across the city, furnaces shift to ember sleep. Forges lower their flames to the pitch that keeps dreams soft. The palace hearth takes the last watch and hums the tune rocks taught it when they were lava and had more time to listen. Finn and Jake rise. Finn is a degree cooler than when he arrived and feels taller for it. Jake is still scarf-shaped and decides to remain so until the bridge outside where the rock likes company. Flame Princess walks them to the threshold. She places a coal the size of a marble in Finn's palm, a souvenir of a new law that isn't written down. Ember etiquette, she says. Teach anyone who wants it. Finn closes his fingers and feels not heat but promise. He nods once, a night for a nuance. On the balcony they pause. The Fire Kingdom purrs. Up above, little loner stars drift into the bigger sky and blink. You're safe. I'm here, your turn. Before fading into warmth, the night will spend carefully. Far off, the Ice Kingdom feels the memo pass through the dark and decides for later to try snow that lands as applause instead of surprise. They take the path out the way respectful guests do, footfalls sinking a little into stone that appreciates the visit. The rim wind meets them where cool returns and Jake resumes his usual bounce with a stretch like a sigh. Finn pockets the etiquette coal beside a button and a folded note from PB that reads, "Remember water." He lifts a canteen. Jake tips it. They pour a circle on the rock, a punctuation mark that means this was good. Behind them, Flame Princess dims the palace lights to the color called Ember Heart. She sits again just inside the door and stretches her hands toward the hearth. The bell forged from cool lightning rests. The salamander dozes in ash. Somewhere a vent smiles shut. The Fire Kingdom proves that purring suits it. Finn and Jake crest the white ridge where the wind has already lowered its volume. Jake pulls long into a woolly scarf that loops twice around Finn and once around himself because style is also engineering. The crown cold hum that used to stand guard over everything is smaller tonight. The sound of a refrigerator remembering it's in a kitchen with people who like quiet. The Ice Kingdom holds its breath the friendly way. Spires shine, commas of frost instead of exclamation points. Icicles along eaves write in cursive where they used to shout in stalactite. On door lintels, rhymes have learned to curl like calligraphy of hush. Penguins in tiny patrol hats waddle in slow figure eights, flippers tucked, beaks pointing to the safest steps. Gunter leads them like a metronome with opinions, peeping once when anyone gets too peppy. Ice King appears on a balcony in a bathrobe the color of dreamland, robe cord tied like he practiced and got proud of it. He raises both hands in the grand old gesture of, "Look at me," and then, catching himself, lowers them to the new gesture of thanks for coming. The crown on his head hums at a bedtime pitch, cool rather than cold. He waves, and the wave becomes a mitten, because that is the level of magic we're playing at tonight. We're testing slow snow, he announces, trying not to announce. Prototype number 1000 and sleepy. Finn grins in the way that tells a friend his experiment will have witnesses who are rooting for it. Jake bumps fists with a penguin and becomes a small windbreak around the nearest drift, so the drift can practice not being dramatic. They step into the main hall where the ice has taken up a quieter architecture. Ramps curving down like easy thoughts, stairs that remember knees. A chandelier of frost drops one note and holds it, and the note feels like moonlight taking its time. On a central dais sits a wide wooden bowl lined with knit, a contraption Ice King calls the snow slow. It looks like a soup for weather. He brandishes knitting needles with the proud peril of a man who watched 3 tutorial tapes and wept at the wholesome parts. Cozies, he murmurs, for flakes, little sweaters so they land nice. Finn helps by adjusting the snow slow's crank to the setting labeled applause instead of avalanche. Jake pads over to the draft windows and tucks his tail under the sill so breezes learn manners on the way in. BMO pops from Finn's pack and stamps the air with a pixel sticker that reads, Soft Weather Dev Build, and immediately files it in a folder called Very Good. The first flake drops from the ceiling vent, dressed in a tiny hoop of knit that glows faintly like a halo, embarrassed to be seen. It drifts. It dallies. It touches the rim of a glass and decides the sound it would make is too proud. It chooses silence. 1,000 siblings follow, slipping down like postcards from above, each reading, Wish You Were Here. By here I mean bed. Penguins gather in a semicircle, eyes bright, heads rotating with the solemnity of ushers seeding stars. Icicles speak in cursive over the doorway. USH, they write, the letters curling, the S a long ribbon that leads the eye toward a bench Jake has become. Finn sits and lets a flake tap his glove. The cold is not a bite tonight. It is a mint, and the wrapper says kindly. Ice King tries a behavior he has been rehearsing, the sport of letting go. He pulls a balloon from the pocket of his robe. On it is written with jiggly marker, a big idea that needs to wait. He opens the window, holds the balloon out into the velvet air, and releases his fingers one by one. The balloon leans away like a plan that found a better time and drifts toward the glacier line, where even schemes curl up and dream of being useful later. He closes the window softly, a man returning a book he finally read. Slow snow learns its route. Down the spires, sliding the railings like polite children who obey the sign because an adult they love wrote it. Across the bridge where the ice is thick and the cracks look like sleeping lightning. Onto the square where a skating pond has posted its own rules in frost. Go in circles. Touch hands when you pass. If you fall, take a bow first. It makes standing easier. The rules hold. Finn and Ice King stand together at a window that no longer rattles. Finn breathes on the glass and draws a tiny crown with a smile in it. Ice King breathes next to it and draws a little sword that has no point, only a handle. Together, by accident, they invent a sign language for truce. Jake looks over their shoulders and adds a scarf. BMO adds a save icon and quietly commits the scene. Penguins carry in thermoses of cocoa that steam in curlicues. Gunter sets one by Finn, another by Jake, and a third by the crown with the dignity of a butler who understands that objects perform better with small kindnesses. Ice King swaddles his cup in a knitted sleeve that looks a lot like a snowflake wearing a sweater. He hums a lullaby he swears he wrote, then admits he probably heard it from a radio, then stops explaining because the song is doing its work without provenance. Outside, icicles keep writing. LETITGO they trace, and the letters do not sting. They curve like advice accepted. Above, the sky has borrowed ember stars from the Fire Kingdom and set them against the blue like punctuation, meant to reassure. A snow owl passes, wings muffled, and drops a feather that lands like a check mark. The crown hums once, a little stronger, the way old tools do when they see their owner trying a new angle. Ice King puts one hand on it, steady, like holding the steering wheel through a gentle curve. Easy does it, he tells the metal. We're doing slow. The gem dims in agreement and wakes a soft light in the corner of the hall where a nest of blankets waits. He notices the nest as if it had just invented itself. Maybe, he says, for the penguin. Gunter peeps twice as if to say finally. They take the test outside. Slow flakes in knit halos drift from the high venting spires and keep to the tempo Finn learned in the Candy Kingdom, the tempo Jake set in the Fire Kingdom. The tempo PB wrote on a clipboard that every good night secretly reads. The snow prints delicate commas on the steps. It writes margins along the paths. It chews shoulders and hats with discernment, anointing instead of dumping. A shy avalanche leans from a ridge and looks down, embarrassed at its own volume. Ice King tries a new hand sign, and the ridge repacks itself with a sigh. The mountain equivalent of tucking a loud thought back in under the pillow. Finn grins without showing teeth because this isn't a victory to punctuate. It's one to keep. BMO toddles into the square and sets up a one-penguin booth, handing out pixel badges named Cursive Reader to any bird who watches the icicles long enough to learn the letters. Penguins accept with the gravity of academics. Gunter stamps Gunter on the frost with his feet, which is absolutely not how letters work, and everyone applauds anyway at a volume that makes no snow fall from roofs. They stroll the perimeter. Jake grows into mitt rails beside the slick bits. Finn thumbs the etiquette coal from Flame Princess in his pocket and feels it approve of coal done kindly. Ice King narrates the history of a rink where once he danced alone, and tonight he is content to watch. He tries on an old habit, a burst of brag, then lets it melt and slide away under the new habit, which is noticing how good it feels when the kingdom breathes without him pushing. On a last balcony, where the wind writes smaller, they stop. The sky has switched fonts to lullaby. Loner stars drift through the high vents and wink at their cold cousins. Far to the south, the tree fort's window glows the color called home. East, the Candy Kingdom is a nightlight. West, the Fire Kingdom purrs, its embers sending tiny postcards the air delivers safely to the edge of snow. Ice King removes the crown. Not a grand gesture, a practical one. He sets it on a cushion stitched by his own clumsy hands, the stitches uneven and perfect. His hair lifts in the cold, then settles because the room has learned not to bite. He sits between two penguins who lean without asking permission. Because friendship has permits, no one has to stamp. He tries the bedtime sport again. He lets go of a sigh he has been saving for years. It goes out the window, turns into 3 slow flakes, and lands like forgiveness. Finn claps once in his coat pocket so the sound can't get ideas. Jake yawns, the kind of yawn that travels a polite distance and stops at the kingdom line. BMO toggles to night mode and writes in the corner of the screen, Snow Friend, established. They say they're good nights. Not the old kind with edges, the new kind you can hold. Finn touches the crown once with 2 fingers, the way you tap a sleeping pet you love, just to count the breath. Jake becomes a sled for exactly 1 slide down the long, safe curve for the joy of it, then pops back to feet with a chuckle that doesn't echo. Ice King waves in a small circle, a promise to practice, and calls after them without shouting, I'll knit more cozies. I have ideas about mittens for hail. They descend the ridge. Behind them, the Ice Kingdom keeps writing its lesson on every ledge. Hush and let go. Be here. Fall gently. The flakes land where they're needed most and nowhere else. Penguins tuck into their knit nest. The crown naps on its cushion. The icicles spell good night one letter at a time until the word is finished and the sentence sleeps. Under the tree fort's lowest boughs, the night market blinks awake in little lights and soft signage. Not the noisy bazaar of quests and bargains, but the bedtime version that opens only when the grass promises to keep secrets. A ribbon of stalls curves toward the meadow, each one built from gentle materials, quilted tabletops, chalk labels, paper lanterns tied with shoelaces. The air is warm enough to be kind, cool enough to tell you it's late. Finn and Jake step down the ladder not like adventurers entering a dungeon, but like neighbors stepping onto a porch. BMO toddles between them with a folded map that glows without bragging. At the bottom corner, BMO has written in blocky letters, "Routes where dreams have right of way." The map updates itself as lanterns come on and footsteps choose the friendliest detours. The first stall is run by a snail in a vest who sells goodbyes you forgot to say. Each goodbye is stitched into a little felt banner that dissolves after you think it. Finn chooses one that reads, "Thanks for today," and the banner warms in his palm, then fades with a polite nod. Jake buys a banner that says, "See you, pal," and ties it to a breeze that takes it where it needs to go. BMO accepts a banner that simply reads "Save" and tucks the feeling into a folder that opens like a bedtime book. Across the lane, a star cart creaks into place, drawn by a sleepy ram. The vendor is an old comet wearing spectacles made of ice. He opens a velvet case and reveals pinprick constellations you can borrow for a night, each with a paper tag handwritten in patient ink. Gentle arc for window, cloud dot for pillow, slow north for welcome home. Finn signs out a cloud dot for the tree fort's window. The comet stamps the card with a seal that looks like a yawn wearing a crown. Marceline floats in from the dark side of the path with a crate of vinyl records that only play at night. She sets up a phonograph the color of dusk and lets a needle fall into a groove shaped like a river. The song it makes does not ask you to listen. It sits beside you like a friend who knows the way back. Jake sways by accident, and then on purpose. Finn taps the beat into the wood with 2 fingers. BMO logs the tempo as the room's heartbeat. Further on, a baker with a whisk for a wand offers moon rolls that steam like soft argument settled kindly. Princess Bubblegum appears with 2 test tubes of tea and trades them for a tray. No coins change hands. The trade is time and proof of concept. PB lifts a roll to her nose, decides it smells like success, and gives the baker a sticker shaped like a check mark that sticks to anything good. She tells Finn the Candy Kingdom's lights are holding steady. He points to the Fire Kingdom's horizon, where purring embers send occasional postcards shaped like sparks. In the distance, the Ice Kingdom answers with cursive snow, the letters reading, "OK." Beneath a banner stitched with the word messenger in 5 alphabets, small birds wear tiny mailbags and take orders, slow enough to spell names right. A hedgehog posts a note addressed to tomorrow's self. Remember the shortcut where patience lives. BMO submits a single line to a star whale passing overhead. "Please cruise the high lane, thank you." The whale obliges immediately, its silhouette like a boat remembering to be gentle on a lake made of sky. Finn notices a table stacked with polished stones that fit in a palm. A sign says, "Pockets for worry. Borrow one, return empty." He takes a stone and lets it hold 3 small thoughts until their edges round, then slides the empty stone back onto the stack. Jake squints at a nearby booth labeled "Maps of Nothing Urgent" and buys one that shows the best paths between couch and kitchen at night. without bumping shins. He folds it carefully and keeps it in his brain where good roots live. At the center of the market, a stall with a roof of leaves offers tickets to the night ferry. The ferry is a bridge of light that arcs from the tree fort's branch over the creek to a rock shaped like a listening ear. The ticket taker is a raccoon in a vest full of pockets and advice. He hands Finn 3 stubs stamped with tiny moons. First crossing is for quiet wishes. Second crossing is for small apologies. Third is for walking back with lighter shoulders. They take all 3. The ferry moves at the speed of a thought. You don't have to carry alone. Star whales cruise higher lanes, close enough to leave dim trails that BMO records as dotted lines on the map. When those trails intersect, little icons appear. Pause spots for clouds, resting nests for owls, refuel points for meteor ideas that might be better in the morning. Finn points out a whale calf practicing the slow turn that keeps the constellation from getting dizzy. The mother hums 2 notes that sound like continue and safe. The sky agrees. Back at the stalls, the night locksmith tightens a hinge squeak in the air where 2 paths meet. The squeak had been waking Roses. He oils it with a bottle labeled Hush. 2 stalls down, a tailor mends the hem of a dream so it won't catch on a worry and tear. She works in thread that looks like spider silk and patience. Marceline's record flips itself and plays the side that sounds like a hammock. BMO unfolds the map on a crate and adds the routes the market invents as people walk kindly. Where Kid moves to let an old tortoise browse the shelves, BMO draws a tiny bridge. Where PB and a peppermint guard split a crowd smoothly, BMO marks a roundabout labeled Courtesy. Where a penguin spills cocoa and 3 volunteers kneel with napkins, BMO dots the spot with a warm symbol like a lantern. Finn watches the lines grow and understands he is looking at Oo's version of an atlas of trust. At the edge of the lane, a booth with no name offers bottles of borrowed courage you don't have to open because the label works on contact. Finn touches one and remembers holding Jake's scarf in the Fire Kingdom. Jake taps another and remembers slowing the sled before the Ice Kingdom's long curve. BMO touches the smallest bottle and remembers saving the game by writing the world down in little lights. They do not take the bottles. The bottles have already done their work. The market reaches peak hush. Stalls begin to pack themselves neatly as sleepy shopkeepers smile without selling anything else. The comet closes his case of borrowed stars with a click that sounds like a lid sealing promise. The snail in the vest waves his felt banner one last time, and the air cleans up the leftover goodbyes so no one trips. Marceline slips a record into Finn's pack, a gift labeled for when the room needs to remember. PB leaves a note on the tea stall that reads, "Return mugs tomorrow," signed with a tiny drawing of a crown and a beaker holding hands. The raccoon tears the last night ferry stub. Finn and Jake step onto the bridge of light. BMO toddles between them with the map rolled up like a telescope that looks inward. On the far rock, they stand quiet and let the creek tell them it will keep the moon's reflection safe until morning for anyone who misses it. They thank the creek just by standing still long enough to mean it. They walk back through the thinning market, where vendors fold cloth like closing words. A gust could ruin this, but there is no gust tonight, only the kind of breeze that reads a room. The lanterns fade to firefly. The path becomes path again. The tree fort tilts its face in a way that says, "Did you get everything you needed?" And the answer is yes, because the list was simple and already in their pockets. Inside, BMO pins the map to the wall by the ladder, a soft atlas of how to come home. The dotted lines glow a little, then calm. Finn tucks the borrowed cloud dot into the window frame, and the room inherits a small, steady star. Jake turns into a blanket, not because he is tired, but because it's nice to be the last thing the night needs. The record in the pack waits. The felt banner memory of thanks for today lingers like a lamp left on hallway low. Outside, star whales finish their rounds and send the last postcards of glow along the high lanes. The stalls sleep under their own tarps. The raccoon counts tickets twice and finds none missing because everybody went where they were going. The comet tips his hat to the tree fort and rolls off into the kind of dark that holds hands. Finn says the bedtime sentence he improved at the market. Good night, everyone we know and the ones we don't yet. Jake answers with a practical plan for dreams. Rest now, stretch later. BMO clicks. Save one more time just to be sure, and the icon nods, the universal sign for story kept. The fort breathes. Ooh, breathes. The night market folds into the space between worlds, a pocket that will open again the next time lanterns decide to be patient. For now, the map on the wall glows in its sleep, a promise that there is always a route where dreams and roads agree to share the right of way. The tree fort stretches its branches the way a house yawns. Window lights brighten from candle to kitchen. The soft edges map under the bed warm slightly, remembering the way home from everywhere. On the table, 3 small things sit where they promised they would. The etiquette coal from the Fire Kingdom, cool to a pleasant pocket warmth that teaches hands to be careful. The cloud dot borrowed from the comet, still holding one patient star for the room. The felt memory of thanks for today, faint as perfume and exactly as sure. Finn wakes in the middle of a good idea and discovers he does not have to chase it. It's waiting on the nightstand with a note in BMO's square hand. Saved. He smiles a small smile that fits between breath and stretch. Jake is already blanket-shaped and then not, becoming a rug, then a dog, then a friend leaning on the wall, as if the wall needed the compliment. BMO blinks pixel eyes to the brightness called morning and hums the last bar of the record Marceline left, transformed by daylight into the sound coffee smells like. They climb to the branch deck. Ooh is busy in the kindest way. The Candy Kingdom is a low hive of useful footsteps, lollipop turrets polished but modest, fountains switching from commas to sentences about breakfast. Princess Bubblegum's beaker dries on a rack, and the needle on lullabies per milliliter rests at the mark named Well Done. A peppermint guard tests the phrase good morning in the new tone he learned and finds it fits. Beyond the gumdrop hedges, the Fire Kingdom purr is now a steady cat under the floorboards of the day. Forges glow to the setting call work without rush. Along the lava banks, yesterday's loner stars have cooled into smooth pebbles that look like somebody kept a promise. Flame Princess stands on her balcony and lifts 2 fingers. A vent opens politely to let a song out. She hears a boy on a rim somewhere say, "Thank you," and feels taller for it. On the White Ridge, the Ice Kingdom wears its slow snow like a knit scarf draped exactly right. Icicles sign one final word before the sun erases the letters. Ready? The rink posts new rules in frost that shine even as they disappear. Turn kindly. Catch each other. Laugh at the falling, not the fallen. Ice King opens a window, finds no draft to scold him, and puts the crown on his head without asking it to be loud. Penguins shake knit from their shoulders and walk in neat pairs to a breakfast that has learned to be warm on the edges. Between these kingdoms, the night market has folded itself into pockets and drawers. The raccoon counts the tickets and finds a small extra, stamped with a moon and a word. Later. The comet rolls past, nodding at the tree fort with the professional affection of a librarian who knows which shelf you need next time. The snail in a vest straightens a chalk sign that now reads, "See you tonight," and draws a tiny arrow that points toward patience. Finn takes the etiquette coal from the table and closes his hand around it. It gives back the temperature of promise. Jake becomes a small bench so laces can tie themselves properly. BMO taps the rolled map on the wall, and the dotted lines dissolve like chalk in rain, not erased, just absorbed by memory. The folder called Routes Where Dreams Have Right-of-Way becomes a new folder called Today's Shortcuts to Good. They set out gently. The ladder creaks once to say, "I remember," and then behaves. Grass springs without complaint, happy to be footnoted by feet that walk softer now. The creek keeps the moon for a last minute, and then returns it to the sky with a flourish so smooth no one notices the handoff. Finn stops on the rock shaped like a listening ear and whispers the morning version of the sentence he perfected last night. "Good day, everyone we know and the ones we don't yet." Jake adds a sensible strategy. Snacks early, arguments small. BMO stamps the air with a pixel badge that says "Warm Start" and files it under done. At the Candy Kingdom gate, PB holds a clipboard with nothing on it yet and looks delighted by the blank. She has learned that empty space is where kindness fits best. Finn signs the board with a star that means here if needed. Jake leaves a donut-shaped loop for later. BMO adds a check mark the size of a comma. Peppermint Butler tilts his head in a way that suggests the whole city slept on purpose and woke up richer. They cross fields that remember blanket forts and take the hint, keeping their grass low where knees will kneel and high where insects need privacy. A sunflower nods to a sword hanging from Finn's hip, and the sword nods back. "Today we watch," it says without words. Today is one of those days you rescue by not rescuing. On a ridge above the Fire Kingdom, Finn reaches into his pocket, feels the etiquette coal, and holds his hand out flat. Heat rises and stops exactly where it should. He nods, and the whole morning under his feet nods with him. Jake, pleased with the exchange, lengthens into a walkway for a salamander courier with glass letters. "Take the cool way," he says. The salamander taps a toe in thanks and follows the path that spares her shy ember. They do one quiet lap of the Ice Kingdom's long curve. Slow snow becomes sparkle on stone, then water learning to be puddle, then a dark line that remembers being river and will be again. Ice King raises a mitten without waving too hard. He has knit a tiny hat for hail that doesn't exist yet, and holds it the way you hold a future without scaring it. Finn gives a thumbs up inside a pocket so the gesture doesn't get ideas. Jake slides once on purpose and bows to the pond before it can catch him. BMO stamps cursive reader on his own screen and teaches the icicles one emoji before they go. By the time the sun stands fully, the quiet paths have become the day's main roads. The Candy Kingdom's kids carry lunch pails along streets that learn to say, "After you," and mean it. In the Fire Kingdom, smiths pass tongs without clank. In the Ice Kingdom, a ramp belongs to everyone without needing a sign. Between the night market's dotted lines have faded into habit. The ferry's bridge of light is gone, and the creek has remembered its own stones, placing them where ankles will thank it. Back at the tree fort, the door knows the hour and opens like a thought, finishing well. Finn sets the etiquette coal on the sill to warm the wood with a secret. Jake becomes a table just long enough for plates to land in the right places without thinking. BMO fixes the record player with a pat that is mostly ceremony and drops Marceline's gift onto the turntable. The morning side plays. It sounds like clean socks and agreeing about nothing important. They eat, and the world outside eats too. Bees take nectar without rushing. Bread cools on a windowsill, in a town that learned to keep cats off pies by giving cats pies. A cloud kisses the top of a hill and leaves a thumbprint in shade that exactly fits a nap. On the horizon, star whales sleep nose to tail in a slow circle that looks like a crown someone set down for a minute. Finn takes the soft edges map from under the bed and lays it on the table. The patches glow in daylight differently. Candy is cordial. Fire is working. Ice is composed. Home is listening. He threads a new line with a finger for the morning patrol that is not a patrol so much as a promise. Check in on PB's class, because small scientists like being seen. Wave at Flame Princess from far enough that heat stays a hello. Watch the slow rink once to make sure the rules feel like invitations. Return before hunger becomes a plot twist. Jake approves the line with a paw stamp that leaves no ink and all intent. BMO saves the map and then for fun saves it again. They shoulder the day. It is light and also real. Finn slides the etiquette coal into his pocket, not as gear, but as company. Jake shrinks into scarf for the first shiver of the morning shadow, and then expands into shade for someone else. BMO rides the shoulder that needs balancing, the universal answer to tilting. On the branch deck, they pause. Dawn has already walked the lines they drew and left them better. The path to the market is just grass now, and yet if you wanted it, the stalls would return because patience remembers where it was invited. The ferry is creek and stone, and yet if you needed apology, the raccoon would find you a ticket. The stars are invisible, and everywhere, the Fire Kingdom's loner lights having retired as pebbles along a safe bank. The Ice Kingdom's cursive has melted into tiny drinking straws for moss. The Candy Kingdom's metrics have turned into laughter and lines that children form without being told. Finn says the day sentence. Let's do it simple and right. Jake answers the way best friends answer a vow that will need snacks, and with sandwiches. BMO adds a sticker to the corner of the moment, where no one can see it and everyone feels it. Level up, gentle. They go. Not fast, not slow, exactly at the speed of everything that slept well. The tree fort watches them leave with the contentment of a chair that knows they'll sit again. Ooh opens its gates in every direction, having memorized the size of their steps. Birds add harmony to the record that plays in the kitchen window. Somewhere a wolf tries a poem in daylight and decides to keep that too. By noon, when the sun makes its big, friendly circle, the lines drawn in the dark are completely part of the world. A kid in the Candy Kingdom steps aside instinctively to let a stroller pass and thinks nothing of it. A salamander in the Fire Kingdom pauses at a vent and practices the long inhale Flame Princess taught and keeps her message intact. A penguin reads an icicle's last memory in water and nods wisely before waddling on. And under all of it, the market's map of trust glows quietly where BMO filed it. A blueprint no one needs to see to follow. When night comes back, it will find roads already paved and soft. It will find a ferry waiting in the space between breaths. It will find embers that remember how to purr and flakes that remember how to fall like applause. It will find a crown that can be quiet and a crown that can be sugar and a crown that can be a tree fort filled with friends who figured out that softness was a strength the whole time. For now, morning carries them forward. Finn with a pocket-warm promise that heat can be kind. Jake with stretches preloaded for any curve in the day. BMO with a save point tucked behind the sun. Ooh with a memory of lines that keep choosing the way home. The night has done its kindest work. The farmhouse out in nowhere has folded its squeaky doors. A pink dog has finished checking shadows twice. And somewhere a kettle in the kitchen remembers the exact temperature of comfort. Townsville has set its sky to the color of safety, 3 capes tucked away while streetlights learn their inside voices. A secret lab has clicked through its lullaby protocols until even the big red lever looks like a nightlight that trusts the room. The cul-de-sac has counted its marbles and its blessings, forts folded, crown straightened on a block of wood who listens. The tree fort breathes the soft breath of ooh, while ember stars from a patient kingdom blink their little promises to snow that has learned to fall slow. If you are still awake, that means you stayed for the whole parade of gentle. You walked the quiet roads with us, past Courage's brave little heart, past Blossom's neatly drawn map of dawn, past Dexter's machines that sleep better with a story, past a blanket city that turned errands into kindness, past Finn and Jake's roots where dreams have right of way. Maybe a line from an old theme song floated up and decided to be a lullaby instead. Maybe you felt one of your own nights line up with theirs and the world got a touch easier to carry. Before we switch off the lamp, tell the comments one small thing you loved tonight. Was it the way courage stands guard over a house that hums, or the chalk line blossom leaves in the sky, or the way a robot arm learns to place instead of rush, or the paper crown that does its job by staying put, or the bridge of light that knows exactly how fast your thoughts should walk? Tell us your comfort snack, your childhood rerun, the episode you swear could tuck a whole city in. We read those notes like postcards from your corner of the map, and everyone helps us make the next night softer. If this story kept you company, let the little buttons know so they'll bring you back here without making a fuss. Tap follow so tomorrow night finds you easily. Leave a small good night for someone else to discover when they can't sleep. There's a whole playlist of gentle worlds curled up right beside this one. When your eyes grow heavy, let the next tale start on its own so the room keeps the same heartbeat. Think of it as a night market that remembers your favorite route. You can come back to this any time the day forgets its manners. Let it play while you drift, the way a porch light stays on for late arrivals. Courage will check the yard again. The professor will balance toast and conversation. Double D will label the breeze agreeable and file the jitters kindly. Eddie will drop a marble in the for tomorrow can and grin like he meant to. Finn will press a fingertip to the seam of ooh and promise to do it simple and right. These worlds don't mind repeating themselves when repetition is another word for care. If you're already halfway to dreaming, we'll keep the last watch. We'll dim the fountain from exclamation to comma. We'll oil the hinge behind the thought that always wakes you. We'll line the hallway with the tiniest stars, the sort that know your name but don't call it. We'll ask the wind to use its library voice. We'll leave a glass of water at hydration station with a note that says, "For night thirst." We'll set the hotline on the end table face down so it can rest too. And if your morning needs a map, there's one waiting by the door. Townsville will start on cordial. The lab will remember that small variables behave. The cul-de-sac will practice after you without keeping score. The Fire Kingdom will purr instead of roar. The Ice Kingdom will write ready in meltwater. The Candy Kingdom will measure sweetness in lullabies and declare it just right. You don't have to fix everything to have fixed something. You can pour a little gentleness into the day the way PB tipped kindness into the fountain and let the whole square rise. For now, breathe with the houses. Let your shoulders lower to the setting called safe. Let the bed learn your shape and keep it for tomorrow. If a worry arrives late, point it to the jar with the cork and the paper tag that reads later and go back to the page you were on. If a yawn knocks, open the door for it. It's a friend of the family. Thank you for trusting us with your night. Thank you for walking slowly through these neighborhoods, for waving at old windows and new stars, for believing that softness can be a superpower and that quiet can be a choice we make together. We'll be right here when you want another lap. Until then, good night to the farmhouse and the lab, the cul-de-sac and the fort, the city that glows, the kingdoms that rest, and to you, most of all. Sleep comes easy in worlds that remember how to be kind, and you've just visited 5 of them. When you're ready, let the screen fade like a curtain that knows how to land softly. We'll turn the page for you. We'll keep the porch light gentle. We'll save your place. Good night, good night, good night.